Good evening, everybody. Hey, where's Viola? I got to apologize, everybody. I'm going to be running solo tonight. I shouldn't apologize for that, but Andrew's going to be away for this evening. I think for most of it, anyways. He's got some medical issues, but not life concerning. Don't worry about that. He's good to go. I talked to him today. He sounds fantastic. He just got to get things straightened out. So he's going to miss this one. He'll owe me one. That way I can take one off and then we can go. So I brought my buddies back. Where are they? There's my buddies back there, the bass and the trout. So if you guys want to name them for me by the end of the shoot, I think that'd be very worthy. And thank you very much for that. Yeah, today's going to be a good show. Obviously, we got Gord Pyzer coming on. We have Patrick Walsh coming on from Outdoor Canada Magazine, who is a good buddy of ours too. Patrick knows the game real well, knows fishing and hunting and all outdoors. And then we're trying to get a special guest at the very end. So we're hoping for that. I won't say anything yet because we're going to sort of stay on this fall walleye fishing thing today, which is starting right now. And it's going to go on until the ice hits. So it's very important. I think it should be a great thing to talk about. Just to get to the other stuff, first off, our FNC poll. We're going to talk about that today, and that is why we're bringing in Patrick Walsh. So make sure that the Fishing Canada poll, you go on our socials and you fill in to let us know what you're thinking about this week's poll. And then, of course, we got Fish Top coming up. We got the contest. We're going to, obviously, please go and enter our Mercury contest. It's coming up. I think the second last one, Mike or Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's coming up very shortly, if not within a day or two. And then we got one more. The boat motor trailer contest is still going. So you guys and girls got to try and get in on that one. I think it's the absolute best prize we've given away so far. We have some wood stuff coming up, though. I'm telling you right now, don't fret. We're not going to hurt. We're not going to rob you of all the contest stuff and all that. It's keeping everybody going. Please subscribe to our YouTube if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube, and get your friends to do it, get your family to do it, get whoever you can, because it's going to all help in the long run for us. We're still going through all this COVID time, this craziness, and we're not on the straight and narrow yet. So we're trying to figure things out as best we can. If this thing works really well, we'll just stay with it. So. Anything else on that? I guess what we'll do next. We'll throw right to the bumper of Fish Talk with the Doc, because it's a very interesting subject that is very pertinent to right now, the fishing right now. And even if you don't fish this time of year, because it is nasty, it is cold. I've got a story before I go to Gord about that one too. I have to tell you about this. It's not for the faint of heart, but I'll tell you what. If you do fish this time of year, it's very rewarding. I mean, it can be humbling, but it can be rewarding. I'll tell you about a humbling story before we get to that. So I've been bugging Ange and Mike, wanted to take them to a little lake that I know of. We needed a couple pieces for Fishing Canada for the television show. So I said, guys, let's go up to this little spot I got. It's mostly to Ange. Mike was sort of there. He just comes along and does his work and doesn't really care about the fishing. He just wants to get the job done. So I said to Ange, well, the good thing about this lake is if we see two boats, maybe you'll see one. If we see two boats, I'll go eat that boat. And then the second thing is that we're looking for a smallmouth bass or two. I says, I rarely catch a smallmouth bass. Well, as luck would have it, we saw about 5 boats that day on a lake that's no access. It's all private access. And the biggest smallmouth bass we caught might have pushed 2 1/4 pounds. Might have. Anne's got a walleye bigger than any of the smallmouth that we got. So I ate crow that whole day. I felt so bad. I talked to Ange about it today in the truck. I said, buddy, I'm still hurting on that. And he just laughed. But he says, that is, that's part of the game this time of year especially. But last year at this time, I said to those guys, last year at this time, I was calling my shots. I was learning Garmin Live Scope, and I was calling my shots on smallmouth. I'd see one on my screen, and I say, okay, I'm going to catch that sucker. And it looks to me like it's about 3.5 to 4 pounds. Boom! I was 95% on fire with that. So just you eat your words. You learn a lot throughout the year, no matter how much you fish. I fish an awful lot, and I ate my words right there. I said, okay, there's a story. There's a lesson to be learned. So I had to share that with you. So Mikey, if you want, please play our Gord Pyzer piece for the week.
We've just gone through about a 3-week period. We have caught more walleyes over 10 pounds, between 10 and 15 pounds, than any other previous 5 to 10 year period. And we've probably caught 60-70% of those fish by trolling. And here's the secret, and you can do the very same thing. Get yourself a level wind reel, a trolling reel with a line counter built right in. It has to have the line counter. Every reel manufacturer makes one of these. I do not care which specific brand you buy, just pick one up. Get a reel with a line counter built in, put on a crankbait or a spoon, and then start experimenting with different amounts of line behind the boat. Once you get a fish or two, remember the depth that you had back, and then every time you land a fish and put your line back out, return to that same depth, because you've dialed yourself right in. When you do that, you will absolutely amaze yourself how many fish you're going to catch and how big they are.
Gord Pyzer, how are you, brother?
Don't look behind me, Pete.
What do you got? What's on there?
-6 and blowing snow.
Are you kidding me?
No, Northern Ontario, man.
Oh my God, buddy. Is that your first snow for the year?
I wished it was, but it isn't. And here's how crazy. 4 years ago, yesterday, 4 years ago yesterday, it was 26 Celsius.
What? Are you kidding me? Wow. So
that is the North Country in the fall. We we have 2 seasons, summer and winter. There's no spring, no fall.
It's hardly a transition time. It's funny you're saying this to me, because I got an image. I was talking to one of our old buddies from here. He's now moved to the Northwest Territories. He guides on Great Slave Lake now, Ryan Gregory, and he sent me a picture yesterday or the day before, and the ice is on a bay. The ice is out about 200 yards, and then it's open water, and there's a guy driving by in a boat. He's got a still picture of the boat ripping by the edge of the ice, and all these people are playing hockey and starting to ice fish on the ice all the way out there. That was so crazy. I should have got that picture for the boys to put up here. I'll try and get it up on one of our social sites, because it reminds me exactly what you said. It's just like
only in Canada.
Only in Canada, Lordy. Wow. So how long is it going to be before everything ices up on you now?
Lake of the Woods is so big. The really big lakes, they'll be middle of December for sure. But we will be ice fishing on the small ones. My prediction is 2 weeks, 14, 16 days on the small crappie, small trout. I think I mentioned last week, I got a couple of friends in Saskatchewan, and they've already ventured out on some little ponds. And I'm sure we'll be doing that pretty soon. Sooner, I was out trolling for muskies yesterday on Lake of the Woods, and it was 44 degrees. So that means on those smaller backcountry lakes, I'm sure they're in the 30s now. So we're quickly getting down to 32.
So before we get into today's subject of the line counters, I really want to get into, let's talk just a quick bit about that, because this freezing up process, the water temperatures obviously have to hit a certain temperature before they can freeze, I'm assuming, right? And it's got to be a matter of a calm night or two to start the ice. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. We talk about turnover, fall turnover all the time. And I've mentioned this on the show in the past. Water is densest at 40 degrees. So it settles. But as I say, yesterday when I was out, it was 44. So biologists refer to it as the thermal resistance to mixing, and it's almost nil now. So from the top of the lake, and it doesn't matter, it could be Lake Simcoe, Lake Superior, Lake Ontario, Lake of the Woods, when it gets in that low 40 range, there's no resistance to mixing. And so now we are right in smack dab in the middle of fall turnover. And this is how that surface water, when the wind blows, this is how surface waters get taken down to the bottom, and this is how oxygen gets restored to the bottom of the lake. So for the next, as long as they stay open and don't freeze, they are constantly in a state of turnover. And because water's densest at 40, It'll be 40 degrees down on the bottom. But tonight, with all the snow falling in the water, the surface will probably be 34, 32, just in the top inch or so.
Really?
So right tight to shore, you will start seeing 2-3 inches of ice work out, and then maybe the waves will break it out. I mean, when we were out yesterday trolling, our line guides were freezing up. We had icicles hanging off the line. And as you said, Pete, you got to endure it, because you know what? This is truly, truly, truly some of the best fishing of the year.
Absolutely, Gordy. I'm 100%. And that's what you're in your little piece there talking about line counter reels. Well, let's get into that for a little bit, because I don't know if what you were trolling for at first, but I know the big deal down here in southern Ontario obviously is this Bay of Quinte thing that's going to be coming up, and all the Great Lakes and the big water, and line counter reels play a huge part in getting the right presentation to those fish. Correct?
Pete, everything we do, and you know this better than most, everything we do, when you catch, you were talking about smallmouth earlier in your trip back the other day with Ange, everything we do is about replication and duplication. Right. And so, I mean, if I was out yesterday, and I was trolling for muskies, it was a pretty tough day. We got a couple of really nice pike, but we didn't get any muskies. But if we got into a couple, Pete, and I told you they were down in 18 feet, and we were letting out 139 feet of whatever pound test line, I could tell you that right now, and you could go out here and catch them. So replication and duplication is what we always are striving for. And nothing makes it easier than a line counter reel. It's just kind of like downrigger fishing. And, when you put the riggers out, and the magic depth of the day might be 97 feet down. And if you're the only guy set at 97 feet and everybody's at 120 or 140 or 72 or whatever, you're catching fish and they are not. And we have always talked about depth control. Nothing. Every time you pick up a lure and go fishing, the number one thing you are worried about is depth control. And that's what a line counter reel helps you do. Get to the proper depth and then duplicate it.
You see, well, you got to listen to what Gord said. First off, if anybody's been out on a trolling, on a charter, let's say, like Gord was talking about, and all of a sudden, there is one rod and it's hitting it. Maybe you're taking turns. Everybody's taking turns. So not one person catching the fish, but it's one rod catching all the fish. Like Gordy said, that thing is dialed in at 97 feet or 57, whatever it is. And there's something about that bait at that depth, especially, that's consistent. Now, a good guide, a good charter captain, and they all do this, is they'll get all the lines up then. They say, okay, let's bring everything up to that 97 feet, and everything's going to run at that depth, and hopefully other rods can go off. Sometimes it's still the same rod that goes off all the time. It kind of freaks you out, but it's so key. And then when you go to I brought some line counters in too. So I think they're the same ones that Gord was showing. With these reels, basically, let's say before line counters came along. When Gord and Ange and I were fishing in our younger days, we never had these reels. We had basically either a spinning reel or an old bait caster. And you'd eventually learn that, hey, so many pulls of line or whatever got us those fish. We'd always kind of indicate, as Gord said, which ultimately it's not really how far back it is, it's how deep that lure is going, what Gordy was saying. So we used to do it inadvertently with spinning rods, with bait casting rods, but it's so loosey-goosey, as Gord will attest to, and anybody that does precision trolling, that there needed to be a way to fix it. And that's what they come up with these reels that have the little counter on top of them. You can see that little line counter on there. And that line counter, it goes back by the feet. Some of them go by yards, but this one goes by the feet. That's a little zeroing. You just reset that, and it zeros the reel. So what you do is you zero that reel. You drop your lure in when your boat's trolling. You drop your lure in, and then you just let it go back. You let it go back, and this can be either if you're flat lining, which is straight behind the boat, or if you're running a board, if you're running planer boards. And what you do is you go back. You start to experiment. If it's a fresh body of water, you go back 100 feet. We'll just say 100 as a number, and then you click you click your reel, either start trolling or you put your board out after that, and you know you're back 100 feet and then you're out like that. And you work like that. You work that for the day, maybe a couple different baits, and then throughout the day, you're either changing baits with a dive deeper or shallower, or you're changing your length of lines. Maybe bring them in shallower. Normally, you put them out deeper. If the 100's not working, you go 120, 150, 200, 250 back, something like that. And you experiment until something clicks. And when something does click, and you have all line counters, and you have relatively the same type of line on there, boom, every one of them goes to 180 back, same baits, and all of a sudden you're going to see multiple rods go off. And that's as simple as that, right, Gord?
Yeah, it's not rocket science, eh, Pete?
Not rocket
I mean,
science.
if it was rocket science, you and I wouldn't be doing it. But,
Good point.
you know, the cool thing is you can send me some stuff down from your area, and I can, and you know, that replication, duplication, and I grew up fishing down on the Bay of Quinte, and if ever in Canada there is a spot, maybe out on the Pacific coast, probably the second, but the Bay of Quinte in the fall when you're trolling for walleyes, because they're suspended. And there'll often be over 70, 80, 90 feet of water coming into Picton there and moving through. And they might be down 28 feet. The sun comes out, they go a little bit deeper. The clouds come, they come a bit shallower. And if we've got 2, 3, 4 rods out, we're usually trying to skim. But once you catch 2 or 3 fish, you're absolutely right, Pete. But, you know, the other thing is we'll always play with 1 or 2 others. Maybe set one 25, 50 feet back. And it's always the kind of the ornery rod or reel, the one that's doing something, always testing. You always want to be kind of testing the outside ground, but replication and duplication, I cannot emphasize it enough. And you simply can't do it if 5 guys have got bait casters. And, you know, in the old days, we counted the number of passes. So your level wind on the reel where the line spools onto the reel, we would count the number of times it went across. And that's a really good way to do it if you don't have the line counter, but the line counter just makes it so easy.
Yeah, there's other line counters out there too. These little ones here. You can snap it onto your rod. It just snaps onto that rod. You can see that probably like that. And basically, that's just this is a little birthday counter. You snap it onto a rod. You run your line through that slot like that, and it does pretty much the same thing. Now, is it accurate as compared to the reels with the built-in line counter? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what, it can give you an indication as to what Gord said is repetitiveness. So even if it's 120 back and you're just reading 100, it doesn't matter. If you get a bite on it, you know to go 100 back every time and you're going to catch it. It doesn't matter what that says as long as you replicate what Gord was talking about. And it's such a huge difference. Again, there's depth things, like I brought some other stuff in too, Gordy, like snap weights. When you're running these long leads behind a line counter reel. So I'm going to give you an example. Back in the early day when this Bay of Quinte thing started, so I'm going to say 20 plus years ago. This thing's been going on that long. It's been going on longer than that. Nobody's been catching them. There was a guy named Tom Gustar, and I used to jig, Gordy. I used to go out in the long reach and I used to jig for my walleye because I love jigging. I drop a jig and minnow down or a jig and spoon, and I'd go out and I'd catch 30 walleye in a day, and they'd all be between a half and a pound and a half, and I'd get one big one the whole day. And I got 30 fish today, one big one. Yeah. And so this guy, Tom Gustar, he kept telling me, "Oh, really?" He says, "Well, I don't know where you're getting those 1.5 pounders, but I'm getting 10 to 20 to 30 fish a day, and they're averaging 8 pounds and up." And I'm saying, okay, BS. You are not doing this. Finally, he got me out there. So Tom's from Bowmanville, and we went out one day, and I swear to God, we caught 15 walleye, and I guarantee you we averaged 10 pounds because more were over 10 than under. We get a couple. If you got an 8 pounder, it'd be small. You get a couple of 9s, and then all of a sudden 10s, 11s, 12s. That's back in the heyday when these fish were not pressured at all. So Tom was the only boat. Like we'd go out there and there was literally no other boats. It was so nice. It was unbelievable. And all those fish yourself, you know you're going to average 10 pounds, just a matter of how many fish you're going to catch in a day. It was ridiculous. So, but through time, obviously, with magazine articles, with a Fishing Canada television show. People, we tell people how to go, where to go, and all that stuff as part of our game, part of our gig. We like to share. With that time, the fishing has changed. It has changed immensely. Now those fish are much more boat shy. They're much more bait. What do you call it? Wisdom with baits. You know what I mean? They know what looks different, what's not looking different, et cetera, et cetera. So back in that day, going back to that, we used to troll we still use planer boards. We troll about 50, 100 foot back would be a long lead because we didn't have to go any farther. More was getting them out beside us than behind us, right? And we catch the hell out of them. And then to this day, right now, I'll guarantee you, if you're running 100 feet back, you're probably not going to catch a lot of fish in the Bay of Quinte. If you're running 200 feet back, you're going to start catching a lot more, or even further back. These fish are that much more shy, they're more boat wary, et cetera, et cetera. So you really got to get back there a long ways, and you got to get out there. I mean, your planer boards, you don't have to get out really, really far, but you got to get out there a nice distance to keep the boat, clear of all those fish you're looking for. You're not looking for basically the fish that you drive over. Some people think that you're driving over these fish and you spook them out to the sides and you're going to catch them. Those are spook fish. They might not bite. You're more looking at those fish that are underneath your baits when you're passing through. So I've seen so many days lately that will run 230, 250 behind the boards, or behind the boards. That's another 250 feet back. That's a long ways back, and that's how the fishing has changed so much in the day and age now. Because now to see, like in another month before it freezes up, you're going to see 30 to 50 boats a day out there. Like there's so many guys out there. At least it's a lot of pressure on the fish, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure this is no great secret anymore. It was probably about 15 years ago now, was when I actually filmed a couple of in-fisherman television shows. And the way we compensated, Pete, was we fished at night. I could not believe the Bay of Quinte at night. And I'll never forget, it was the first week of December. All the houses had the Christmas lights up on the houses. And we didn't go out. We did not start fishing until about 7 o'clock at night. And we fished until the next morning. And it was crazy. And they were up in 10, 12. And so, you talk about compensating for that fishing pressure. One of the best ways to do it is to fish at night. And we were trolling. We were trolling just like we did, but they were tight to shore. And they literally were in 10, 12, 15 feet of water.
Wow. Were you running boards, Gordy, or were you just running lines?
No, 100% behind the boat. And I think the fact that it was dark, Pete, and, that's the big equalizer for walleyes is fish when the sun goes down. Mm-hmm. And it was spectacular. Absolutely spectacular.
Do you know if that's still going, that pattern? I'm assuming it would be, but I don't know if it's...
The big draw for walleyes always is the maximum time when light changes at first light and last light. So I'm sure if folks fished right into dark, maybe go out an hour or two before sunset and then fish for an hour or two after sunset, maybe pull the boat around midnight. As I say, it was spectacular. And you would have sworn every time they hit, this has got to be a big northern, and they were in shallow water. It was incredible.
That is so awesome. And you know what? And the reason Gordy, I'll show you guys, grab this. The reason Gordy, I'm sure, wasn't running planer boards in that situation is because you need, in dark, you need control, right? Yeah. And you're fishing shallow, so you need control. So the number one thing is going to be feel. You're not going to even probably didn't have the rods in the rod holders. I'm sure you have none of the rods, right, Gord? You know what I mean? So and the reason you have that feel set up is that if you're getting weeds, because now they're fishing really close to weed beds, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to be able to shake the bait up or get the weeds or pull it in, clear it off, get it back out as quick as you can. These planer boards, this is an inline planer board. This is an offshore brand. And you can see right off the bat that the curve on this. Well, what that does is when that hits the water, it takes it out to the side. That's what all a planer board does, is take things out to the side. This little flag is just an indicator, just so you can see it nice and easy. You got to snap on where you put the line in the front side, and then you got to snap on the back, wherever that is. You put the line through both those snaps. But the problem with a planer board it's a great tool, but what Gord is talking about is you lose lots of feel. Number one, you lose all your feel, basically. You can't really feel anything with this thing because all this is pulling now against the water. And number two is that if you have to clear your line every 2 minutes, you got to take this off every 2 minutes to clear your line. So it becomes a real pain. So it's called an inline planer board. So it stays on your line until you get back to the boat. So when you're fighting a fish, basically it used to be, well, the big planer boards nowadays that you hook up to, they release when you get a fish. They run all day long like this on a big mast, and they release when a fish bites. The line comes out like that. With these guys, that you reel in this until you get it to the boat, and then you still got your 150 feet of line behind. So this is snapped down like that, snaps on your line. You pop that off, you pop the back one off, you take this off, throw it in the boat, and then you free fight the fish on the rod the rest of the way in. So there's a big difference between free lining and planer boarding. These are a great tool for certain instances, but a lot of times, Gord, will be out, and like on the Bay of Quinte we're talking about, folks, you're allowed 2 lines per person. If there's 2 or 3 guys fishing, you got 6 lines at 3 guys. We run 1 or 2 flat lines straight back. And maybe 2 different baits to try the different depths to try like that. But we'll run them really far back, or we'll run lead core or something like that where we don't need the planer board. Right? So the planer boards are, to get the lines out and out. But if you have 2 extras, run them straight back, farther back too. So they're all tools, right? Everything's a tool out there when you're fishing.
100%, Pete, and I know Patrick's coming on later. I think after that first or second show I shot for In Fisherman, I flew back down, and I do believe Aaron Kiley was the associate editor there. I think the boys picked up their first time ever double-digit walleyes the next years after that, trolling on the bay. And I think those were daytime fish. And I do believe we were using both snap weights and planer boards. Right. And the other thing that I love is lead core. You mentioned lead core, but again, lead core is replication and duplication. Every color, there's 30 feet of different colored line. So you simply memorize, I'm out 8 colors or 10 colors, and I'm out 8.5 colors, or you can segment it. But it's so cool that every time we go out, we're trying to find one fish is not a pattern. That's one thing I would say. 2 fish? 2 fish. 3, we're on a pattern. You better start duplicating.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to Gord mentioned snap weights too, folks. We haven't talked about that. So all these little things we're talking about are certain ways of getting depth control. As Gord said, depth is the key to especially these fall walleye. I mean, you could use depth as a key to a lot of your fishing, like most of your fishing. So in this time we're running planer boards on our line counter reels. We got our nice big flexible rods, running a planer board, and we got our baits out, and we want to maybe a thin profile bait. So we're running a real skinny bait that'll dive 15 to 20 feet down. You're thinking that the fish are 30 feet down, but when you run a 30-foot bait, the bait's too big. It's just the wrong profile or something like that. So how do you get that 20-foot bait down to 30 feet? Well, it starts out, you get a little snap weight clip. This is a little clip. Looks just like a clip with a ring on it, but it'll make more sense when I show you the next time when it's set up with a weight on it. So what you do is you just open that little snap up. Once you get, let's say, 50, 60 feet of line behind the boat. First, just let out 50, 60 feet of line, maybe 75, whatever. You snap this on, and now all of a sudden, that 20-foot bait that you're running is going to be pulled down by this, the line in front of it, is going to get it down even deeper. You're going to get that extra 10 feet with the same bait. So it's called a snap weight. It snaps on your line. It's real simple. It's the same idea as the planer boards, which are snapping on your line. Everything is temporary. So you snap that on. So it's instead of having a sinker on your line 50 feet ahead, because that would be no sense because you couldn't reel it in and pass the rod tip once you got to there. It was a permanent sinker. So you unclip that sinker. First you unclip the boards, then you unclip the sinker, and then you net the fish. And that sinker depends. Sometimes I've gone to 3 weights. Sometimes you need a smaller bait, but you need to get it way down there. And the reason I put it 50, 75 feet ahead of the line is basically just so I don't spook the fish. If that thing's going by, it might spook the fish. Nowadays, these are old school snap weights, by the way. The new ones are shaped like little fish. They actually look like little fishies and all that stuff. So Yeah, like minnows, exactly. So, that's why I keep it well ahead, so that if the fish sees that, he might, get a little concerned with it. By the time the bait goes by another 50 feet, 75 feet, he says, "Hey, that's in my wheelhouse. I want that." So that's a great way of controlling your depth. And when you dial that in, so now you've got 180 on the reel, you've got that board out there 50, 60 feet, you've got this thing 50 feet ahead of that bait that runs a certain depth, and all of a sudden you start catching fish. There's your combination right there. Done.
And Pete, you'll drive people crazy. There'll be 20 boats, 10 on either side of you, and they never ask the right question. Usually they'll yell over, "What bait are you using?" Exactly. And that's the important thing. The important thing is, how deep are you? And you'll drive them crazy. We were a buddy of Mark Steffel and I, we were out on the Queen Charlottes, and we got so dialed in. We were downriggers for Chinook salmon, Chinook and coho, but mostly Chinooks. And we were taking the we got totally dialed in by how far back and how deep to go. And I've mentioned this in the past, but in one day, we caught 50 Chinooks, averaging more than 20 pounds. We landed 1,000 pounds of Chinook salmon. And when we came in, all the guys were on the dock waiting for us. But again, they all asked the question, what bait were you using? How fast? And the magic question you should always ask is, how deep were you fishing? If I tell you, Pete, on the Bay of Quinte tomorrow that 90% of the walleyes are in 42 feet of water, I don't need to tell you anymore. You'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out from there. That's so true. That's when you start dialing in your presentation. Okay, you're not, now you know that top 20 feet, don't even bother with that. I'm not going to do anything. Now you know that lead core with that real heavy 30 foot, that's too deep. You don't want to do that either. So now you know that, hey, and you watch your fish finder, and you watch for those. And usually you'll see, it's kind of when they're suspended like that, you'll kind of see an activity level. You don't see the activity going on, but you certainly do see a bulk sort of number of, especially on the Bay of Quinte. It's a great spot, like Gord says. Sometimes you're over 90 or 100 feet of water, and you're seeing all these hooks. Sometimes you say to yourself, "Holy crap, are those walleye? Are they really walleye?" And sometimes they're not, but a lot of times they're walleye down there. And of course, he says to me, "Pete, I was there last week. 44 feet is the number, and it was an overcast day, and blah blah blah." The first thing I'm going to look for is getting my baits at 44 feet or very, very close to that. And then I'll work from there on colors and trying to experiment. But the key will be depth on that. You know what I mean?
100%, Pete. You're absolutely right. I could tell you that it is 44 feet. And you need to then say to me, was it a sunny day? Was it a cloudy day? And then you compensate according. Is it at night? So at night they start coming up shallow. They start moving towards shore. If I'm catching them, or we're getting them at 44 feet on a sunny day, and tomorrow's overcast, rainy, windy, and the wind's breaking up the surface, those 44-foot fish today are probably going to be up in 30, 32. And if you're down in 44, you're going to say, "Wow, what Pyzer, what a load. We're in 40, 44, we're not getting the bite." Well, the day is different.
Yeah. You got to learn the conditions too. So when somebody's relaying messages to you, get the depth is the key, and then everything else after that. Another thing that's the key is, I don't know if you can see these two reels together, folks. I'll pick them up. So one's got braid on it, and one's got fluorocarbon on it. So if you're running two reels, it's probably not a great idea to do that, because it's very hard to match them up, because this braid is heavier than this fluorocarbon, but this braid is a way thinner than this fluorocarbon. So this is 25-pound fluorocarbon, and this is, I think, 50-pound braid, but that 50-pound braid has probably got the equivalent of diameter of 15 fluorocarbon at most, or something like that. That makes a difference, right, Gord? In your depth too. So your line diameter is huge.
Hugely, hugely. And you talked earlier about being close to the boat, being further away from the boat, and you can actually switch your line, go to a gel spun 10, 14, 20-pound gel spun, which is only about 10, 12 diameter mono, and
Right.
it'll get down so fast, but maybe you want to be further back. And so I'll never forget, this is kind of it proves the point, but it was Kelly Jordan, and Kelly won a tournament, a $150,000 tournament in Texas. And I happened to be at ICAST, and I was sitting with Kelly, and he was telling me he was throwing Senkos. And he said it was no great secret. All the guys in the tournament, they knew Senkos were the bait, and they were wacky rigged. But he said it needed to fall so slowly. So everybody was throwing their Senkos wacky rigged on 10, 12, 14. He went 20, 22, 25, and they sank like this. He won $150,000. Depth control, he was getting it down, but that was speed control. And those are the two number one things you're always worrying about: depth control, speed control.
And you know what? When you listen to that, that proves to you that oftentimes line size doesn't matter to the fish. That guy right there, that fish wanted more of that presentation of that Senko dropping at the perfect speed, at the slow speed. And it didn't care if it was 25-pound line. It didn't even pay attention to 25-pound line. It did not matter to that fish whatsoever. So the people that are, I get when you're trying to throw light line for certain reasons, but there are times when you got to throw that out the door and worry about more presentation than anything. That's a proof right there. That's $150,000 US proof right there. Right, Gord?
100%, Pete. Anytime you or I can win $150,000 by simply putting on 8 or 10-pound test heavier line in a tournament, we're going to do it.
Let me at her. It'd be fun. Then you can set the hook harder, right? Yeah. There we go. We'll get into some questions too. How much additional depth could you get? I'm going to say this. Could you, with 1 ounce snap weight? Well, it all depends. It depends on the whole combination. Again, it depends on the bait that you're running. If it was going to be that skinny little guy like that, that's going to get down to 18 feet of water, or it's going to be a fatter bait. It's going to be a shorter shad wrap type of bait. If it's going to be a CC shad, line size, etc. Right?
100%. And I'll tell you something, and that's a great question. And I've got it on my iPad here, but this is called precision trolling.
That's
and it's, you can't see it very well. It's too bright. It was made by.
I'll show you the old school version of it.
Here it is, Pete.
That's the old school version of it right there, what Gord is talking about. It's funny that you brought it on, Gordy, because I thought, you know what, it might be a perfect time for this. This is the 6th edition, so I don't even know how old this is. All based on 10-pound test line, but I'll show you some of the charts. Let Gord go into it, and I'll show you some of the charts here as you go. Go ahead, Gord.
One of the other things that Mark did when he was putting that book together, he came out with what's called the Great Lakes version. And the Great Lakes version of precision trolling shows you if you put a 1 ounce snap weight, a 1.5 ounce snap, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, how deep every one of those half ounces of snap weight onto your line goes. I haven't got them memorized. I got my iPad here. I simply pull it up. It's a great question, but it always shocks me at how little that half ounce makes. It's a lot more weight to get down when you're trolling, say, a Bay of Quinte for walleyes. It's amazing. But Pete, you and I have seen where a half ounce, 3/4 of an ounce, 1 ounce, it makes a huge, huge difference. When you start getting walleyes coming through and they're so consistently locked in a 5 or 6 foot band of water, you do have to get dialed in, and you do want to play with those half ounce weights. And so a 3 ounce, we sometimes get lazy and we'll say, I got a 3 ounce. Pete said I should use 4, but I'll let a bit more line. Pete said use 4. And precision trolling and the online version will tell you, it tells you both how to compensate by putting an additional extra ounce of weight on, but it also will tell you if you let back now 100 extra feet of line. So you can get down to 44 many, many different ways. You can get down to 44 feet using a 4-ounce snap weight. You can get down to 44 feet letting out certain number colors of line. You can do it many, many ways, and precision trolling shows you how to do that. The key is getting down to 44 feet.
Exactly, no matter how you do it. It's funny because the newest version, I haven't seen the newest version, but it's so nice to see how Mark and the guys have worked that out. And what they do, folks, is they don't just guess by golly. They go out with scuba gear on, and they have measuring tools, et cetera, and they let this bait go by them at a certain depth, and they say, okay, mark that at 27 feet. And they do it like this is it's unbelievable the work that they put into this system. Because I mean, back in the day, when it first came out, this stuff right here, that's a dive curve basically on that. I'll see if I can show you what I'm looking at it. So back in my old day, when Tommy and I used to do this fishing here, we'd look at this and there was it's all backwards. The depth down is what you want to get at, and this is how far back you have to go to get that. So if you wanted to run at, let's say 17 feet, you got to go back, whatever that says, 120 feet back to 17 feet. And that's with 10-pound monofilament line. Now that's the way this thing started. And that was back even in that day with 10-pound line. They still did all those measurements, etc. It was so accurate. We used to do that with man stretch 15s and man stretch 20s. And they still work those baits nowadays. They're just a little bulky, and then maybe there's a lot more refined baits out there, but they'll still work. But the key was after the boats started coming out, when Tom and I were fishing out there, that we would say, hey, you know what? Let's take a look at the dive curves. Let's see, we want to get that. We see them on the fish finder at so-and-so. We use the dive curve, boom, 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 to line that out, and all of a sudden you start catching fish. And it was just amazing. It was like, oh my God, this actually works. You know what I mean? You might not be to the foot, but you're pretty damn close. Right?
Yep. And tell you another little secret for all the guys that are going to down to the Bay of Quinte for walleyes. Bob Prost and the late Bob Prost, and this is back in the 70s now, 70s and 80s. Bob invented the bottom bouncer. And he did like Mark did. They went down, had a scuba diver and a big ruler right up to the surface. And it was 1 foot down, 2, 3, 4, right down to 20, 30 feet. And they trolled the baits, and they had earphones in. So they'd say, I'm going to troll a shad wrap or whatever. Tell me how deep. And so it'd come by, and the scuba diver's there, and he'd watch it go by, and he'd say, with that amount of line, you're at 22 feet. Anyway, make a long story short, the dive curves. But inadvertently, they caught fish. And they caught numerous walleyes, and the walleyes, many of them were really, really big. And so afterwards, Prop started thinking, I'm going to go back and check what lures caught most of the walleyes. Now, they weren't trying to catch fish. They just caught them by accident, developing the dive curves. When they went back, Pete, this is shocking. It was something like 95% of the baits had rattles inside them.
Really? Wow. So what do you figure that is? What do you...
It's obviously the vibration and the noise. And it was something about the BBs inside those baits. They were generally rattling baits that caught the disproportionate number of walleyes when they were trolling. And
this bait. So there's no rattles in this one. Oh,
no.
Yeah, there's tiny. You can probably hear that. Tiny rattles in this one. Tiny. Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. The other thing I would say to the folks that are if you're getting into this, whether it's with lead core line or snap weights, to start out, it's best to start out with a lure that really doesn't dive in and of itself. So something like the original floating Rapala, it's really a Rapala will sink down about 4 to 6 feet with a ton of line out and a couple of split shot. So it's a floater.
Yeah.
And those are the best ones when you start out with snap weights and with lead core line, because you're not now having to try and think, is my lure going down? Do I have to add in another 12 and a half feet? Just you then go to the precision trolling, or especially with lead cores or snap weights, and whatever Romanek tells you that 2-ounce snap weight using the 50-50 method is, that's where your lure is, and it works superbly well.
That's crazy, eh? I love this kind of stuff. And when I was there, I only went out once, one trip last year with Steve Nizwicki, and we did quite well. But another thing, a smart thing to do is, if you have local friends or somebody that's always on the hub of everything, to ask questions. So I was working with the Quinte Guide Services there, and Scott Walcott was telling me they were running, their minimum they'd run was 1.5 ounces of snap weights. Usually they were running the Rapala Deep Huskies, and they were running 1.5 ounces to 2.5 ounces of weight. So don't even bother with that 1/2 ounce of weight. He said, you got to get, it's that profile. And they were running weird colors too. They were running Barbie and naked Barbie and all these custom crazy silly colors. And to be honest with you, it worked. Like, I couldn't believe it worked. They put us on to one color that was an emerald shiner. So I was thinking, I remember it was an emerald green. So it was a kind of, that looks bluish maybe, but it was a green like that. This is basically a green bait, folks, just in case you can't tell. So I thought about that. I said, you know what? I got these. This is an old Angelo Viola signature series spoonbill, the Rebel spoonbill, and I thought, wow, that ought to work. It's just suspending bait, it's just suspending on the side of it. And the first fish of the trip was about an 11-pound, 12-pound walleye on that bait. It was the color of that bait for sure that did something. And if you look, it's the same, almost the same lip, same length of lip as the bait that they were running all the way out there. And that's why that bait worked. And now that you say that, Gordon, I was just shaking it. Now listen to this.
Yeah.
That thing is full of rattles. Like, that thing has got a way more rattles than the other one does, even like that. The other one's got more of a slight rattle. So, yeah. So obviously that might have made a key too for that first fish, because it came real quick, you know.
Yep. Two other things, Pete, for the folks that are walleye fishing right now, and particularly the Bay of Quinte. Ted Takasaki's a really good friend, and Ted won the World Championship at Mobridge, South Dakota, several years back. And Ted always tells me, if you're fishing the Great Lakes, your lure has to have purple in it. It's got to have the color purple somewhere in the bait. The other thing that all of the guys, or so many that fish the Great Lakes, will tell you is always troll with the wind. And when you're going with the wind, the way it presents itself, I know a lot of guys, and Ted's one of them. He got on a pattern. We were talking not a while ago, and he was telling me about it. And it's so prevalent of trolling with the wind, they will not turn their boats around and troll back. Even when they've got really good waypoints, they will not troll back into the wind. They will pull all their lines up, run back 2-3 miles, and go back down with the wind. And it just works. It works with the wind.
I wonder, before we get to this, keep that question up, Mikey. I'm wondering, because I'll guarantee you one thing, folks, when you're listening there, trolling with the wind is much easier than trolling against the wind. That is for sure. I mean, you got to dial in your speed somehow. You might have to run drift socks. You might have to run paddles off your power poles, whatever it takes. But if you're running multiple lines and you're running planer boards, you start going against the wind and you have to put that boat in neutral for 5 seconds, you're euchred. You are going to die out there, not die physically, but your lines are going to stall. They're going to start crossing over each other. They're going to do that. If you're running with the wind, if you're trolling with the wind, you can put your boat in neutral and basically you have your wheel turned to a certain point and you can still be drifting, and those baits are all so you're fighting a fish. You don't want, it's a giant fish. You don't want to have the boat in gear for whatever reason. You put it in neutral and you're still got that forward movement, and all your baits are still out there perfect on your boards, back perfect, nothing gets tangled up. As soon as you go into that wind when you're trolling, oh boy, it can create a lot of problems. Oh God, I have seen so many clusters out there. It's been, including myself sometimes. You just, sometimes you have to. Sometimes I've seen the times when there was a bite against the wind. I don't know why. but for whatever reason, maybe it was the speed, maybe it was the stall of the bait between the waves, but it's very rare. But if you do that, you better be in control of your boat 100% of the time.
Yes.
That's for sure.
And you just said the magic words, Pete, boat control.
Yep.
And our Zoom there's asked the question, how does this translate into boat speed? And I mentioned earlier, the number one thing we are always worried about is depth control. If I tell you the fish are in 44 feet of water, I can give you the best lure in the world for walleyes. And if it only goes down 20 feet, you're not going to catch a thing. I can use a terrible crankbait and pull it in 44, and I'm likely going to catch far more than you using a crappy bait or the right bait, but in the wrong depth. Depth control is always number one. Speed control, how you're presenting that bait, the speed at which you present the bait, and it doesn't matter whether you're casting or trolling. Speed control is always the second most important thing. You get depth control and speed control dialed in, and your day is made. And going with the wind, as you said, Pete, is just so much easier. You can throw out drift socks, you can slow your boat down, you can pop it in and out of gear, but going with the wind in general is, especially if it gets windy or on big water like the Bay of Quinte, it is just so much easier to control your speed.
And another thing I'll add to what Gord's saying, that when the question came up, when you add speed into it, well, speed is a key in depth as well, and in crankbaits to a certain point. I mean, sometimes once they get to a point, they might not go any faster or slower. But if you have to really slow things down, for instance, that'll change the depth of a crankbait as well. So if you're always looking at the speed on your GPS, don't look at the speedometer on your boat. Look at the speed on your GPS, because that's to the 10th, and it's very accurate. Okay, it's extremely accurate. And then use that as your guide. And when you have that bait at 180 back, it's a bait that dives 20 feet down. You've got an ounce of snap weight on it, and all of a sudden you sped your boat up to 1.8 mile an hour. There's an example, and you catch a fish. All of that has to register now, because that is probably influencing that bait to a certain depth as well. So you have to keep the speed in mind. And it's like Gord said, when you're casting and reeling, if you're cognizant of your speed, it means you're changing things up until you find something that works. And when you find something that works, you stick with it. Same thing with trolling. Exact same with trolling is a classic example of where you need speed. You have to add speed into that equation to make it all work out. So you just use that GPS. If you're using either your drifting to your trolling motor to your big motor to what, it doesn't matter what it is. Speed will be a critical factor in there as well.
And as you mentioned, Pete, if we stick with the Bay of Quinte for walleyes, if I flipped you down a note and said, we were out and they were in 44 feet of water, that's great intelligence, but was it windy or was it dead calm? Right. And I can tell you a specific bait, and it might have been working when it was really, really windy. And if we were going at the speed, which our last listener just asked a great question about boat speed, but there are certain lures that work much, much better at certain speeds. And so if you're just starting out on your own, if you're going to the Bay of Quinte and you don't have any great intelligence to go on, never forget that certain baits work at certain speeds much better than others. Some you've got to be going a minimum of, say, 2.75 or 3 miles an hour. Others work really, really well at 1.25, 1.5. And so fine tune your baits to how fast you're moving or being forced to move in the wind. So if you're forced to move really quite quickly, don't put on a bait that's going super. Put on a bait that's maybe a wider wobble that just it looks perfect in that movement at that speed. So you could have two baits that are going the same speed, but one hardly moves because it requires a faster speed to go in. So. Right. It's tough things to think about, but it's what we're always doing is fine tuning. Maybe you got to move instead of a crankbait, maybe you got to move over to a spoon, and spoons start doing things. Spoons are one of the most overlooked big open water baits. I got a buddy in Lake Erie, guides on Lake Erie, and a spoon. I would go so far as to say he's the best guide on Erie. And spoons are at the top of his list for walleyes. Yeah. And most guys don't pull spoons for walleye.
There are guys that have been doing it on Quinte with success. It's not very popular. I think they're keeping really tight-lipped about it, to be honest with you. But there are guys that do it. Another thing, I want to go back one step about the speed thing that Gord was saying very quickly. I'll give you a past Pete Bowman experience, and very much means in the world of speed. So there's two crankbaits we run a lot out there. There's Reef Runners and there's tail dancers. That tail dancer works fantastic at a faster speed. That Reef Runner, for some reason, doesn't work with a shit at a faster speed. I don't know if it follows out, or if there's there's something that kicks out wrong or whatever. At a slow speed, when the fish need to be slow, that Reef Runner is so perfect. There's something about it. You throw a subtle colored Reef Runner, even a clear with a mylar in the middle of it, Reef Runner out there on a slow speed, especially in the calm days or something like that, when really things are really tough, whatever, that thing will kick butt. But when you got to run it fast, there's something about that bait, in my experience, that doesn't run right. That's when you run a bait like the Rapala, like the tail dancer, the deep tail dancers and stuff, like 20 and 30 foot tail dancers. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the properties of the bait, the way they dive, but it makes a difference, huge difference.
Pete, I hope nobody's listening in from Kenora, because what you said is so true. And here, our water's dingy and dirty. And most days, if it's a reasonable, we got to slow down a bit. You can't pull too quick if you're pulling. And I'll tell you right now, a Reef Runner's the number one. I'm not sponsored by them. I buy them at the store like everybody else. Yeah. A Reef Runner is the number one walleye pulling bait on Lake of the Woods, dirty, dingy water. And so again, but you can't, folks listening in to me right now can't say, oh, I'm going to run a Reef Runner then in the bait. Whoa, the water clarity is totally different, and you do exactly what you said, Pete.
Yeah, yes, it makes a difference. I mean, that's funny that we're talking the same bait, sort of like that. Are you running like the bigger Reef Runners, Gordy, the 800s, or what are you running?
Yeah, the bigger, definitely walleyes, and I've mentioned this many times, but walleyes are one of the truly true fish that the bigger a walleye gets, it actually does want a bigger bait. It's quite amazing. And I worked for M&R for so many years, and Dr. Peter Colby at the Savannah Lake Research Station out of Thunder Bay. And Pete always told me if he had large walleyes and he left them over in the research in the pens, and he put in really large minnows and crappie-sized minnows, when you came back the next morning, they had selected for the big minnows. And walleyes are one of the few fish that truly, as they get bigger, if they can, they will eat a big. So folks will say, I've caught all kinds of walleyes on crappie jigs. Absolutely. If you drop it down over their nose, they're going to bite it. But now if you're 20 feet away, and you've got a 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce jig, and you put on a 5-6 inch minnow versus a crappie sized minnow, it will consider swimming 10 feet over to bite your bait if it's worth its expenditure of energy versus going over to pick up a little tiny crappie minnow.
Wow, that's amazing, eh? I never knew that with walleye. That's a great.
Yep.
See, that's the information in my head right there too. I mean, I run big baits inadvertently just because, you know what I mean? That's what we've been doing for the last 20 years out there, sort of thing. And we do it on smaller lakes too, even in Northern Ontario. But I never really equated it to a walleye wanting a bigger meal or a bigger walleye wanting a bigger meal. But is that the same for muskie? Is that the same?
It is, Pete, and it's so. I happen to be a member, still a retired member of the American Fisheries Society, and I happen to be reading a muskie feeding study carried out in Wisconsin on the weekend. And the interesting thing, the muskies that they looked at were eating proportionately so. A 40-inch muskie would eat a bait that was, say, 29% of its body length, or say 1/3 of its body length. So a 40-inch muskie was preferring when they did the stomach analysis, was eating baits 1/3 its length. But when you went to the 50s and the 48-inch muskies and the 52s, they were still preferring but imagine a 30% length bait of a 52-inch or a 54-inch muskie. So while the percentage stayed the same, the bait got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the interesting thing is they preferred to eat one bait that was bigger rather than two that were smaller but equal in mass. And you go, wow, we'll never figure these things out.
Yeah. It's got to be like a convenience thing for him. I'm going to just, boom, that's it. I'm going to take my energy. Because a big fish to attack has to go into full attack mode. That's probably pretty exerting on a fish, I would think. Even if it's a short spurt, it's probably exerting. Another classic example of big fish, big baits is when you're going up for giant lake trout. If you're on a lake trout, like a big lake trout. I'm sure Lake of the Woods has got it to an extent, but when you're really getting up the Northwest Territories and up Nunavut, et cetera, and the reason, like you see the guys that are running big T55 and T60 flatfish, giant flatfish baits, ones that you'd never run for anything else. Like they're not big in the muskie world, but they're certainly big in the lake trout world. Spoons, the biggest 5 of diamonds, the biggest daredevil, the biggest canoe spoon you can find, and we always, we just equated that big fish to big baits just because. But we saw it firsthand so many times now, Ange and I and Reno and I, in that we'd be fighting an 8-pound lake trout, 8 or 10-pound lake trout, bringing him up. Oh my God! And he bit a big spoon. The spoon looked too big for that fish. And all of a sudden, I'm going to get my arm right. Boom! Out of the bottom, a 35 or 40-pound lake trout bites that lake trout. Bites an 8 to 10-pound lake trout. And we thought, okay, maybe it's a zone thing. Maybe he owns that little area and all that. Because later on those trips, we're seeing lake trout tails in lake trout mouths that are that big, 5 to 10-pound lakers that were eaten by 30 to 40-pound. You caught him on a rod and reel, so he's still eating, and he's got a lake trout tail. So you can imagine a fish eating an 8-pound. An 8-pound lake trout is a good-sized fish. You know what I mean? They eat them.
But it's not that big to a 40-pound laker, Pete?
Obviously not, right?
That's a normal size meal it's like what we eat.
Yeah,
I was on Lake Athabasca for Lakers doing we were fishing Bondi baits, 7-ounce, and with the Magnum Bondies, actually 14-ounce Magnum Bondies, and probably at least 4 times bringing a giant up like 30, 32, 34-pound lake trout in that crystal clear water. And here's this giant Bondi bait in its mouth. And out of nowhere, a 40-pounder comes and tries to take it out of its mouth. And you go, oh my God.
How awesome is that, eh?
That's why we live in Canada.
That's why you live in Canada. That's why we recommend, if anybody, right there is one of the reasons you should do a once-in-a-lifetime trip to a lodge, just for experiences like that. It might not happen to you, but the only place it's going to happen to you is on a Lake Athabasca, is on a Great Slave, Great Bear Lake, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can ever afford a trip to these lodges, we highly recommend it. I mean, even the Northern Ontario lodges for pike. There's those pike experiences, Gord, that you'll have. You're reeling in a 2-pound walleye, and all of a sudden T-boned by a 44-inch northern, boom, and he just swims around and he won't let it go. Just looking at you with his eyeballs. Okay, who's going to win this tug of war? You know what I mean? It's friggin' insane.
And that tells you if we should be using slightly bigger lures, Pete.
Exactly. We got one or two more questions, Mike. Is there anything that pertains to what we were talking about, and then we'll let Gordy go? I don't know if there's anything. I know Calvin had something. On. Gord, are you saying trolling with the wind at your back?
Yes. Yeah. Troll with the wind. Don't fight it. Let the wind be your ally. And so many times we'll pop the boat out of gear to slow down. Maybe the wind's blowing too quickly. The other thing, and we'll maybe talk about it on another show, I love them, are wind socks. Throwing wind socks off the back of the boat, especially our smaller boats. We'll throw a wind sock off, and it's just a big billow, and it catches and it slows you down to a crawl. We will troll I will troll with the motor still running, but with the windsock out, and I can put it as slow as the boat will go, and it just totally slows me right down because now it's pulling all that water behind, just like a big billow. So yes, troll with the wind. I think it's something about how the fish cruise with the wind too, Pete. I think they're swimming. They're not fighting it. Those
Right.
walleyes from the Bay of Quinte, if the wind's blowing right down the bay, they're not fighting that current underneath. They're going with it. And
the bait is probably doing that same thing. And if you're looking like what the bait's doing, but you still have a little something different in there, that could be the key, right?
yeah. So, yeah, make it easy out in the main open waters, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, trolling with the wind. Basically, everyone does it, and don't fight it.
Yeah, drift sock. Yes, he said drift sock the same as a very quickly before Calvin. Yes, a drift sock is the same as a wind sock. So just to let Bob know that one. Calvin, I like this question because it is a good one. While trolling, is changing direction slightly as in tacking a good idea? Gord, you can take that on. I know my answer to that one.
Absolutely. We to be totally honest, we never really, as much as we can, troll in a straight line. We were out yesterday trolling for muskies, and you would have thought we were drunk trolling. I mean, we might have been going with the wind, but we sure weren't trolling straight. And many times your inside rods or your outside rods, every time you make those turns, one rod falls, the other rod all of a sudden picks up speed because it's now the powerful rod. And then you level out, they both equal out, and then the other rod. So tack into the wind, absolutely.
Here I'll give you an example. Okay, let's just say these are both suspending baits, but let's just say this is a floater and this is a suspender. So when you're running a corner with a floating bait, so when you're running straight, that's all it's doing. When you run a corner, like Gord said, if it's either speeding up or slowing down, if you're doing it on the outside rod, it's going to speed up. That bait is going to actually start digging down a little bit deeper, like that. It's going to actually do that a little bit deeper until it plateaus out, and then it's going to go straight again. When it's on the inside and it's stalling, if it's a floating bait, it's going to it's working, but it's coming up higher like this. So it's basically doing that. That can be a key trigger. That might be what these fish are wanting. If you get bit twice, like Gord said, once maybe a fluke, twice. If you get bit twice and that bait is rising like that, you best be making a lot of those inside turns with that floating bait. Same thing if it's a suspending bait. So this suspending bait, this is it's the same theory, but it's different, 100% different. Is that this suspending bait, when you're running straight, it's doing it straight. When you go on the outside turn, it's probably not going to change much of a depth, but on the outside, it might go faster. The key is on the inside, when it goes slower. So now you got a slower bait. All of a sudden, that bait is stalling out almost like this, but it's not doing this. It's not doing, so all of a sudden, it's stalling out in that zone. All of a sudden, and then it starts speeding up again. Oh my God. You can smash fish when you do it that way. When you start watching a crankbait, the different crankbaits at corners and cornering.
Pete, sure. You're so right. And what we're really saying to folks, always assume there's a fish behind your bait. I always assume there's a muskie trolling, a walleye, a lake trout. And so the baits are now both on the same level, but now I make a turn and one of them starts to rise up quickly, or the other one stops right in front of its face. And it's almost like they're sheepish. I got to hit it. And this goes back, it was 1983, 84, I think it was. My daughter was about 5 or 6 years old, and we won the lake trout tournament in Thunder Bay on Lake Superior. And we were trolling, had downriggers on the boat, and I was pulling Rapala floating minnows behind the downriggers. And back in those days, I'd tilt the angle on the sonar so I could shoot back. I could see my cannonballs behind the boat, and I could see my lures, and we could see the trout pull in and start cracking. And we called it the Pyzer pop-off. And as soon as we saw 2-3 fish following our baits, I'd put the boat into neutral. I'd go to the back of the boat, snap the rod off the downrigger, and just tighten up. And I would not do a thing, would not reel the line. The baits started to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you hold up.
No kidding, eh?
He won the tournament.
I love that. That's ingenuity right there. That's using your electronics to the utmost, and it's using your head, it's putting all the equation together to win. So we could go on and on and on, folks, about trolling. I'm gonna cut Gordy loose here because he's been on for a good hour and he's given us valuable information. If you like something in this thing about the trolling or whatever, please send us suggestions as to what, I mean, Gord is a plethora of information and he's got every technique going, and he could go on forever about all this stuff. And Ange and I love listening to him and joining in with him too. So if you have some ideas that want to spawn off of this one, maybe with trolling, et cetera, then by all means, we can carry this conversation on, at a future time for sure. So thank you very much, Gordy, again for this, and hopefully you won't be ice fishing for at least another week or two.
I'm going to fly down and fish Quinty with you.
Buddy, there's still, you know what? I'm planning on going largemouth bass fishing this weekend. So I want to go. I know when the water hits in the 40s, there's a whole other show we can do for you folks about that. And maybe I'll have some pictures and maybe something I can show you. But I know we're lucky in the sense of, we do have a nice little spread between the north and the south for open water, even on small bodies of water. So we still got another 2 to 3 weeks of bass, and then the walleye start. But Quinty won't freeze up until December, so we're good for that for a long time. So get down here, buddy. We'll do a trip on the water. We'll do one before the year's over. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be fun, Pete?
It'd be awesome. Go ahead. Thanks so much, Gord. Take care, brother.
Be good.
You too, bud. Gordy Pyzer, man. You know what? Gord brings the best out of anybody when he does seminars, et cetera, but when Ange and I are sitting here, okay, this is all unscripted stuff. The only thing that's scripted is we throw Gord's piece in there and say, okay, line counter reels and go. And then Gord goes, and then we bring in our stuff and we go, et cetera, et cetera. And it works. And hopefully you guys are liking all this stuff. You guys and girls are liking all this stuff because it is very enjoyable for us to do it. And not often do we get to free fall like this. We can write an article, we can write a piece on the website, we can do a television show. Gord can write a piece in Outdoor Canada magazine and all that stuff, and it's very strict and structured and all that. This is so nice to be able to just sit here and blab it all out, and the ideas come to us so quick as we're talking about the lake trout smashing big baits because they eat lake trout 8 pounds, 10 pounds, and the walleye bigger baits. Even I learned this stuff. So just to let everybody know, it's even I learned this stuff. So that was very good. I'm going to move on with this show. I got all my props sitting around here. And my next guest is a very good friend of Gord Pyzer's, actually. They work together. His name is Patrick Walsh. He's the editor-in-chief and brand manager for Outdoor Canada West. He's been there for 20 plus years, or maybe the magazine has been. I'm not sure about that. We'll ask Gordy. It's been established in 1972. It's Canada's leading fishing, hunting, and conservation magazine. The magazine is published 6 times a year, so it has a bunch of different issues, fishing, maybe we'll get about that with Pat, and hunting, et cetera, et cetera. In 2005, 2011, and 2012, the Canadian Society of Magazine Editors named Outdoor Canada the country's magazine of the year, and Patrick Walsh was named the editor of the year. So this guy... Let's just tell you before I bring him on, Pat guides me very, very nicely. He'll want a destination piece from Fishing Canada, and Ange and I will be writing them up. And then we say, okay, Pat, here you go. And then Pat has to hack our horrible writing up and make it look half decent for everybody else to see in his world. So he's a very good editor. He's good at what he does. So let's bring him on here, Patrick Walsh from Outdoor Canada Magazine.
Hey, Pete.
What's going on, buddy?
Oh,
did you learn anything from Gordy there? Did you watch him for a bit?
Always. Yeah, I watched the whole thing. It was great.
Isn't he something else?
Yeah, he's a force of nature, Gord Pyzer.
Like I cannot blame you for having him as your editing, fishing editor or whatever the magazine. Is that his title, fishing editor?
It is indeed. It was 20 years, Pete, that 20 years August I've been with the magazine.
Good for you.
And one of the first things I did was make Gord the fishing editor.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's a good choice. Now, how do you do that? Before we get other questions, we'll quickly go on that. How would you do that? Like, you're just going to get in there and you say, okay, I got to make some changes here. Do you have to fire somebody out of there first? Or was there no fishing editor in there? Or how did that go about?
Yeah, there was no fishing editor. And, the best part of being the most important thing about being an editor is having some humility and knowing when you don't know as much as other guys do about certain things. And it didn't take me long to figure out Gord was an angling savant, as it were.
Yeah.
And I did not want to lose him and his sage advice and his knowledge and his writing. He's a good writer too.
Yeah, yeah. He's passionate about his writing. He's passionate about his speaking. Like, when you see him here, when he was on Outdoor Journal Radio with Ange all the time. I mean, people were just ready. Oh, here comes Gord. Okay. When Gord talks about his articles coming up in either your magazine or in the online portion of your company, and I'm right there. I got to read him, because when he says it, I'm going to write a piece on blah blah and blah. I'm there to read blah blah and blah as soon as it comes out. I can't help it, but Gord, he's like a hero. He's an icon for sure in Canada and Canadian fishing, and
for sure
really is a hero. And
I mean, the guys that are totally into fishing, Gord Pyzer is a household name, just like you guys.
Yeah. So
and if Gord's still listening, we have snow in Peterborough too, Gord, right now.
Actually, I heard you moved to Peterborough, right? You just moved.
Yes. It'll be a week Wednesday.
Holy crap, buddy!
Peterborough. In fact, I don't know what people from Peterborough called you. I think we're Peterburns. I'm not sure, but I am one.
I know one thing. You're a lot closer to Ange and I now. Like, you were right. You're just north and east a little bit of us now.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. I'm a lot closer to a lot of fun stuff here.
No excuses now, brother.
Yeah,
we got to get out together. Maybe next year. Maybe this year.
We do. It's, I've been out with Ange, but I haven't been out with you yet. I'm still waiting for that.
I know. I play hard to get with all the girls. So we're gonna go back to and I have not seen the results to this poll yet. So this week's poll on the fishcanada.com. I'd like to see the results. Mikey, can you throw that up, or somebody throw up our poll results? So, do you prefer to read fishing articles in a magazine or online? Wow. So 68% of our audience said online, and 32% said a magazine out of 889 voters. What do you think of that one right there, bud? Because you of all people, you run both now. You have Outdoor Canada magazine, which is an awesome publication. We all know that, but you also have online. So what do you think of that?
Our research kind of flips that the other way.
Is that right?
Yeah. I'm wondering if that's so strong online because of you guys. They're online there to see you. And
right. It's an online survey, but you got to, the way Ange and I would look at it, I know I'm looking at it now, he'll look the same way, is that it's almost like it's our audience that has been brought from television. And I don't believe we have a young audience with us in this of 14, 15, 16-year-old kids or whatever. I think we're sitting in there in that 30 category and up like that with a lot of our TV audience. And I would have expected, if that's the case, they would still love to read a magazine. Yeah. I know myself, I love reading a magazine. I'll do both, but I do not miss an issue of Outdoor Canada magazine. I'll read the hunting articles if it pertains to me somewhat. You know what I mean? I'll read some of the outdoor. I just like that hard paper feel, the good glossy quality in front of me. So I'm really surprised at that one, to be honest.
Yeah, our audience, our readership is average age 45 to 55.
Yeah.
So a bit older. And maybe that reflects our findings. We did a survey recently. It came out in the fall of the outdoor community in Canada. We had let's see here, 3,700, just over 3,700 responses, and we asked them what their media source of choice was for fishing and hunting information. So 43. I have to put my glasses on.
I work
into that.
I stop it up and say, okay, I'm old. I got to wear my glasses all the time now.
43% said that they prefer to get their angling information from print magazines, and 14% said online.
Okay. The
next highest after, then 26% website search engines. So go figure what the difference there is. But print still beats them out, and television was 20%. So 20 beat online magazines. TV beat online magazines.
Wow.
Then we did a specific survey of our readers, our subscribers, and we asked them, in your opinion, which media source delivers the highest quality of fishing and hunting information? And 77% said print magazines, and 21% said online magazines, and another 29% said websites. So obviously that's over 100% because some of them like both. So,
Right.
but still, all our research is showing print rules for media.
Where did you run that survey? Was it, how did you run that? What was the procedure to it? Like,
The outdoor one was done by a group called True North Marketing.
Mhm.
They sent out, they targeted over 300,000 anglers. I can't tell you exactly how they got these names.
Yeah, you know,
And from that, we got 3,700 responses.
and that's by email? Is that what they did? They sent it out by email? Or, yeah.
Yeah. And same with our readership.
Huh. That's crazy because that's very, there's a whole difference right between us here.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I see like Josh Klein there. He says prefer magazine, but online is much easier.
Yeah, I think it depends on. So if you're out in the boat and you go, what the hell did they say in Outdoor Canada about this trolling speed, for example?
Right.
You go look at our digital version on your handheld device. You know.
Yeah. So maybe, yeah, that could be it too. Because I'm trying to think of when you're at home. It could be 50-50. For me, it could be 50-50. I mean, a computer is easy to use. I'll look at this screen and I can pull up multiple magazines, different, you know what I mean? All kinds of stuff. There's a plethora of information out there. But when the paper magazine is laying at my house, I want to read that. I want to pick that up. It's just that there's something about the feel of that. You know what I mean? The whole procedure. The pictures are great. And I mean, the magazine, the experience of the pictures in a magazine, I believe are more enlightening or whatever than online. The online pictures are kind of there just as a little tool. When you look at a magazine with a real photograph from a real good photographer, it's like, oh God, there's something about that. That just, you know, you get deep into just that picture alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
And you know, our subscribers have a choice.
Right.
You want to receive it digitally or print or both, but the print far exceeds the digital demand. I think people do like the tactile quality of a magazine. Like hands and take it, roll it up, hit flies, do whatever.
Yeah. So,
and you can't take a laptop to the beach, or you shouldn't.
I could hit somebody with my laptop. My wife will hit me in the head with my laptop sometimes. But when did you go online? And what, obviously the decision is just because the same as Fishing Canada. We just, oh my God, we got to get there. We have to get there. Everybody's going online. And when did Outdoor Canada start the online deal?
Well, the website way back, obviously, because that's what you did. You had to have a website when everyone started having websites.
Right.
Digital magazine. Oh shoot, over 10 years now.
Okay.
Bring that product.
And do you have?
At first, it was in a PDF format, and then it's media. Yeah.
So your subscribers, do you have strictly online subscribers? Like they just don't want the magazine at all. I just want online. That's it. Send it.
Yeah, there's a few, but it's not very big, Pete.
Right. That's what I'm wondering.
We're talking hundreds. So.
Yeah. Probably, I would assume a lot of them like the both, right? I would assume there's a good group of people that say, I want that magazine, but I want to be able to see it online as well.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? Same price. So.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I had a couple of. So what? You've done this long enough now. You've got 6 issues a year, right? Mm-hmm. Is there 6 or 7 issues a year? What do you got for? Yeah. You have a title on each one. So you got fishing, you've got hunting, you've got.
Well, yeah, we've got the fishing, hunting, and then the other 4 are by month.
Okay. And there's no real, is there a category for them or no?
We did do that. We tried an experiment for a few years by giving them all themes.
Right.
We decided it was more advantageous to us in terms of offering a good mix of fishing and hunting seasonality topics and content to go May, June, July, August.
Right. Yeah.
And hunting in November, December.
Mm-hmm. Is there an overwhelming difference And I'm not saying this to say hunters or anything like that. It's not what I would do. I'm just wondering if there's a real interest in the fishing issue, the hunting issue, or is May, June like a number one seller on the, or it draws interest? Is there anything like that? Have you ever tracked it?
Yeah, well, we try to judge that. It's hard to tell with our subscribers because they're getting them all and you're not sending them back.
Yeah.
So we look at the newsstand ebbs and flows, and it's a weird science because you don't always know why a issue performed poorly or performed well on the newsstand. Was it the cover lines? Was it the image? Was there something going on in society that time where, like, for example, our spring issue was a write-off on the newsstand because of COVID. It hit that March, April issue. Yes.
Right.
So just there's so many different factors that can affect the sales performance at the newsstand. But we find traditionally the fishing and hunting issues perform the best.
Mm-hmm.
They're also out in the newsstand longer.
Right.
And then the fall, the other fall issue does well, September, October.
Is there so how do you guys, let's say Outdoor Canada magazine is in the world of digital right now, and then the subscriber base getting mailed to. When I go to a Chapters, there's a Chapters right here, right north of me, 2 blocks north. Okay, there is still a ton of magazines in those magazines. Mm-hmm. I mean, an absolute ton. So when I see the poll coming up of our poll there, of our side of it, and I see those numbers are way down, are the numbers of newsstand prices, are they holding somewhat aside from COVID, the last 5 years, let's say?
The number of titles is shrinking. It's the print media in general, newspapers as well. It's very tough not because of audience and readers. People have proven through the studies and such as we did, and we're also measured by an auditing bureau, that people want the print product. What the problem is the advertising, and it's migrating more and more to digital. And specifically, Google and Facebook is eating a huge chunk of the advertising pie out there, and less and less for print media. And that's the tough part for magazines, and that's why you're seeing fewer and fewer titles, least Canadian titles, and more of the strong American titles dominating the newsstand.
Really, eh?
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's got to be a real tough game. I mean, even in the TV world, like we're constantly, Ange and I are constantly talking about, these online YouTubers and et cetera, that are getting all these views. I mean, how far into the digital world do we go versus the television world do we go? And then to let the audience know what we're talking about here is that, everybody knows, let's say a YouTuber gets 1 million views on a video. Well, it sounds, we go, oh my God, we got to get on that. We have to get on that. But then when you look closer into it, you see that he's got those 1 million views over 3 years. And then so we look at our Nielsen ratings and we say, wow, we got that 1 million views in a season, different viewers on television. So it's hard to compare it because you're looking at that digital world saying, oh my God, that's the future. But we're still pulling in great numbers on television as well, right? So
yeah,
it would be obviously for you guys and for us, it'd be great to own them both.
Yeah, it's a matter of convincing the media buyers when they make their decisions of where they're going to place ads for their clients that our product, your product, it's a specific targeted audience of guys that want to know about fishing stuff. They want to know about hunting stuff.
Yep.
Whereas if you just throw it out there to the world in the digital sphere, it's not necessarily getting in front of people that need to see it.
Right.
So we really try to sell our quality audience to the advertisers.
Yeah, it's funny. Let's break away from that a little bit more. Just
boring for people. I'm not getting a whole lot of questions here about ads.
Yeah, if we want to get some questions on that. I want to let everybody know that Pat is not just an editor. He loves fishing. He loves hunting. He's outside all the time. So get into a little bit about Pat. What have you been doing lately as far as fishing? Have you been out at all? And what's your game from? How was this year?
It hasn't been a great year of fishing for me. We're not running a boat this year, so I have to rely on, people inviting me out, Pete, to go fishing.
You must be hard. If you're going out with Hockley all the time, you must be hard up. That's all.
No, I go out with Chris a lot. I love Chris. He's great. And I do stream fish. I fly fish, so I don't have any excuses there. I've just been extremely busy. My wife and I, in April, we made the decision that we wanted to move. And so we've been spending most of our free time house hunting, prepping our house that we sold for sale, and all the fun games that come along with that. So it was almost a bit of a lost winter and fall. I'm moved now. I got the decks cleared for rifle season for deer, so I'm happy about that. I'll put a bit of this other stuff on hold for a while. I did have a nice trip out to La Reserve Beauchesne, my annual trip with my fishing buddy.
You go there all the time, don't you?
Got that in.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. And there's just a few local trips and a couple outings with Hockley, of course.
We got a question here. What is your target species, Pat? So we'll say fishing wise, what would you prefer to fish?
I love smallmouth bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Yeah, absolutely. Who doesn't? There's the belligerent little beasts. What about hunting? Do you have a preference in hunting?
I rather suck as a deer hunter, but I love it. My favorite is turkey hunting. I love turkey hunting.
Right.
That was the other thing I did get in. I had a good season this spring despite COVID. I got 2 birds this year for the first time, so I was quite happy with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of COVID, how has COVID? Has it affected the magazine world or the Outdoor Canada world? Let's say you're online or your magazine or whatever. I know you said the sales, as soon as it hit, obviously you took a big hit as soon as you hit the market there. In
the newsstand sales. Yeah.
Anything else with COVID? Like, has it affected you guys, the company?
Functionality, yes, because we've all been, my team and I, my immediate team, me, my 2 editors, and our art director are all working from home independently.
Okay.
So we meet virtually. We've met face to face twice since COVID, and actually we're having our 3rd meeting tomorrow. We've made the decision to let our lease go. We're not going back to the office ever. Really? So yes, we're now permanently remote. So that's a big deal.
Huge.
And so yeah, that's been a bit of a learning curve. We still have some ways to go on that, but we've put out 3 issues now and 1 specialty publication. So we're doing it. We're getting it done, and we're in the middle of that issue now.
Is it more difficult now that you're based out of home to get a magazine printed, or is it all just sort of an automated process that you just go to the right people, and it's all done online, etc.?
We have a system, and it's the same system we used in office. It's just what you lose, Pete, is that creative collaboration when you're dead in the office. Let's just all jump in a boardroom and hash this out and figure stuff out, spitball stuff. We've lost that. Moving forward, as we continue, we'll find, and if once COVID goes away, we'll meet more frequently, I'm certain, because we're not in each other's bubbles. So it's a bit tricky that way, and we're trying to be COVID compliant and be good citizens and all that stuff. I don't want Ange mad at me.
and of course, with you moving to Peterborough, it's probably you move further away from your old office.
Yeah, well, this is it. The decision to work remotely, and my wife's in the same situation, allowed us to do this. We didn't want to go too far from the GTA because, granted, there'll be times we'll have to go in for meetings to our respective offices. So, Peterborough is a good distance, and we just love this town.
It's a great area. What's the next issue coming up? What are we looking for? When's it coming out? And what's?
We're working now on our ice fishing issue, the January-February issue. So it has all our ice fishing stuff. Gordy's great ice fishing.
Yeah.
All full of ice fishing goodness. and that comes out in December.
Cool.
Mid-December. Yeah.
Excellent, buddy. If there's anybody that has questions for Pat before we let him go, I'd love to hear. Is there your target berry fall smallmouth? I know that you have done this, Pat. I think.
Oh yeah, I love Lake Simcoe. Fished it all open water season. Yes, I don't think I've ever caught an 8-pounder, but I've caught some big bass out there. That's an
8-pound smallmouth bass. To let everybody know is like the holy grail of smallmouth bass in Canada. It is very close to a Canadian record. Simcoe has them for sure. Simcoe is one of the rare lakes that has them that big, and one of your best chances is what he was just saying, berry in the fall. There's out of Kempenfelt Bay. There's something going on out there. I don't know if it's a bait thing or not, but the smallish, and I have not fished there ever. I fished further south than that, towards the Keswick area, and of course over towards White Shoal and all that in the main part of Simcoe and all that. But I've never even seen an 8-pound smallmouth live. I've seen pictures of them, but I've never seen an 8-pound smallmouth live. So I would truly love to do that. That'd be
I think a new record's going to come out of that lake eventually. Just I'm eating those gobies, so it's going to happen for sure.
They're getting bigger all the time. So
and all those 30-pound bags now at the tournaments.
Yeah, think about back in when Ange and I and Reno fished tournaments, and Mike Burris fished tournaments on Lake Simcoe. If you brought in 6 fish for 22 pounds, it was a big bag of fish.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to win, or maybe a little 24-pound. You know what I mean? 4-pound average. Now, nothing. You get nothing for that. You would get, hey, get a fun day. You spend a lot of money in gas. You will not get any of that money back. You got a 30-pound bag of fish. 5 fish, 30 pounds is 6 pounds a piece, folks. So then Lake Simcoe does that, or close to that, almost every tournament. Like some of the tournaments, you're mid-20s, 25, 24 pounds. But the later you go on, it's ridiculous. Those fish are huge. So I know Pat's gotten to do that, and it only happens this time of year. By the way, those berry fish. What Buddy's talking about there, I can't remember who that was. They move really deep. They get down in that 30-foot range or whatever it is. I'm not sure, 25, 30-foot range, and the water temperatures are in the 40s. Some mid 40s and all that. You're dragging a tube, or some guys are dragging. Taro Murata, Fish City Tours, he drags live baits for his clients. He runs minnows out there and that, and they catch donkeys. They just catch giant fish. So there we go. What lakes around Peterborough will you target now that you live there?
All of them.
There's got to be some that give
Chemong and Buckhorn and all the great places.
You're right close to all
that. I fished some sturgeon. I think I fished all of them already, but it'd be nice now that I'm in the area. And my wife wants me to get a boat.
Oh, buddy!
Remarkably.
Yeah, beautiful. The Utanabe River, great muskie.
Yeah.
There's really good muskie fishery on there too. You know what I mean? So you're in the hub of a lot of good water, and to the north. If anybody knows the Peterborough area of Ontario, even just to the north of Peterborough, all those smaller lakes like that, not just the big Kawartha lakes, there's some beautiful water around there, and it's multi-species. I mean, it's mostly bass and walleye and muskie, both species of bass. But you find the odd trout lake. You're not far from the Halliburtons now. You can go to the Halliburton area.
Exactly.
Scoop across there and all that stuff. So, any other questions for Mr. Patrick before we let him go? Because I'm sure. Oh. Hey, Ball, you know what? You got your ice fishing issue coming out. Can you give anybody a hint? Because I know you're going to have, you guys always have gear, and I know you don't want to break the news here and all that, but you give them something that they can even look for. A tease.
Let me just look.
There we go. See, he's looking at the screen, folks. That's good. He's getting the good stuff.
The good stuff.
Tim Sturgeon says Bob's Lake, by the way. So there you go. You can keep that one on your list. And as Patrick's looking, Tony's asking there's some great outfitters on Lake Simcoe. Any articles on these guys? So that'll be his next one under that. But there are great outfitters on Simcoe.
We've leaned on some of the outfitters on Lake Simcoe just for fishing tips.
Right.
Don White say John White, over the years. I'm just trying to look up our Jan-Feb issue. Yeah, we're right in the middle of this issue now, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. This
see?
you're so close to stuff, you forget what you're working on. This story, Gord's working on this story now. It'll be in shortly. He's picking the top 12 best all-time hard water lures, in his opinion.
Right.
Tips on how to use them and for what species. So that should be
that'll be a very good one. So
yeah.
Multi-species, multi-lures, a dozen lures. That's going to be good because Gordy will have, and he'll give you experience on them all. And it's not just from Lake of the Woods. He goes to Lake Winnipeg. He's done a lot of ice fishing in a lot of different areas and for a lot of species too.
And a lot of backcountry lakes too up there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then we have
go ahead.
Then we have a piece. A guy, fellow's written a piece, which I found very interesting. It's so easy how to make a ice fishing live well. So if you're fishing, you're catch and release big lake trout or big pike. If you want to revive them before letting go, or keep them for a bit while you get ready to take a picture, and so they're not out in the cold air, they stay in the water. It's very easy, but it's a simple thing about building a trough basically to keep the fish in before you release them.
Perfect. See, that's a good one for people because a lot of people don't realize that. And if there's a few reasons for that. Let's say you're, what Pat was saying, taking a picture of that fish. Number one, you're not fumbling around with the fish, and they do have a tendency to live. They're tougher this time of year. Let's say ice fishing. They're tougher than in a 90-degree summer day. However, you still can't abuse a fish by keeping it out of the water a certain length of time. And the other thing is if say the temperatures are 20 below and it's really cold, that's dangerous on a fish when you hold that fish up for even just a picture and all that. Yeah. Literally, their eyes can freeze over. Yeah. The slime coat on the fish freezes. So by dropping it in that handmade live well for, you have to keep the skim ice off of that too, but it's not going to freeze over. You leave that in there. Camera's ready, everybody. Perfect. Pick them up, take a picture, drop them down the hole. You just got them. It's a great idea. It really is. I love that. So there you go, folks. You're going to get that one in the next issue. Is there any more? Mikey, was there any more up there? You can never have enough fishing gear. I got you on that one. Last question. That's a perfect one to end on. What's your favorite fish to eat?
I'll have to say walleye.
You're saying it kind of disappointed. Why would you say it?
Well, because I love them all, but yeah, walleye, then pike. Funny enough, some people don't like. Well, I think they don't like cleaning pike, but
exactly
wonderful eating fish. Yeah, I'd say of Canadian freshwater fish. Oh, and perch, of course.
I'm with you, buddy. Perch and walleye, number 1 and 2, with pike right behind it. Yeah. And I'll clean the bones out of a pike any day of the week as long as I can get a meal of pike, especially. No problem. Hey, buddy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on, Pete. Appreciate it.
It's always a hoot, and like we said, now you're close. Let's bug each other even more to get out in the water, and it doesn't have to be for an article. It doesn't have to be for a TV show.
No, I want to do it for fun.
Yeah, just go bump around and set some hooks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right on.
My best to Ange.
I will. He'll be talking to him soon. He's in good spirits. He's just got to heal up a little bit. So he's
okay,
good.
Great. Good stuff.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Mr. Patrick Walsh, Editor-in-Chief, Brand Manager, Outdoor Canada West. Great magazine. Please go to their website. You can, and if you want some good reading, if you haven't, most of our people here, I think we have advertised with Outdoor Canada forever and ever. They know that we're involved very much with these guys, but Ange and I are both subscribed, and we read it, we love it, and it's great entertainment, and it's very educational. So now I believe I got one more guy he came on today. It was just an afterthought that somebody came up. So we're going to be talking we're going to go back to the Bay of Quinte, because this time of year, we're harping on the Bay of Quinte a lot, but it can transform into other bodies of water as well. It's a fall fishing, like fall walleye. This is what we're going to talk about in specific with walleye. But this guy, you've seen him on Fishing Canada quite a bit, but he has a very unique past to fishing the Bay of Quinte, and it's been in that November timeframe. The specifics, he'll let us into the specifics. It's a pretty cool story. We'll get him on for a little bit here. I think he's in the waiting room. Have we got him here? I don't want to say his name yet. Mr. Steve Nitzwicki. Look at the hairdo on that.
Hey.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what happens to an honest man when he doesn't get to fish with his buddies.
Well, hey, we better get you in a boat, because another 6 months of that, you're going to be looking like friggin', oh my God, buddy. Look at this.
I haven't been able to do that ever, buddy. I feel like a movie star.
So first off, tell everybody knows Steve from Fishing Canada. He's the former owner of Shuttier Lodge, of course. And that's how we met. Well, we met Steve through the last call, but then he bought the lodge. We did lots of work on this deal like that. He got on to Fishing Canada with us last year, did a lot of episodes. So I'm sure you all remember Steve, but you have to, they remember the clean cut Stevie, the haircut, saying something like this. I just found out about why he's doing this. You got to tell everybody.
Well, I've got a buddy of mine who made a bet, and Dean Barrett, he doesn't usually lose bets, but he's going to lose this one. He's going to lose this one. It's only for a case of beer, but the beer has nothing to do with it. It's really the win. It's the victory. It's beating him, and I'm going to do it. And
this has been so the first guy to get a haircut loses, gets to buy the other guy a case of beer, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, my buddy Aaron Downey, he was in for about 3 weeks. Done.
Did you get your beer yet from Aaron or no?
Hey, yeah. No, I haven't got it yet. It's it happens to the winner. Whoever wins gets the beer. Right. And we've all got to drink it together.
See, the first guy out should have had to buy both guys bring case, and then after that,
he will. Yeah, yeah, but it's all got to be delivered on the same day. Just in case it doesn't last.
Oh my God, buddy! Well, it's good to have you here. So Steve and I were talking to the people up to the side here very quickly, and Steve and I did a show last. Actually, Mike, I don't know if you got that clip. There was a one walleye. We might be able to show the clip of last year's TV show. I'm not sure if it's handy or not, but if he does, it doesn't matter if he shows. Oh, here we go.
How's she feeling, Peter?
We're doing okay, buddy, so far. Get her under control with that, and then we'll go from there. I don't know if it's a big fish or not, but... Oh, it's starting to snow. There you go, folks. There's some weather for you. Yeah. Coming right at your head, behind your head, Stephen. Just watch the slack. That's all I ask of you. I got the rod angled so it shouldn't slack too much.
Ready?
Yeah.
She's all yours.
So hopefully I caught up with it. I think he's still there. Wow, that is cold on the hands. This is not a fair weather sport, folks. I'll tell you that right now. Wow. That is so, and you're holding cold steel. You're trying to grab the, oh, she's pulling now. Oh, you decided to pull, hey, girl. Oh, yeah, I see it. I see it back there. Nice and high, so it's not going to get in the paddle zone. I'm pretty sure it's another nice fish, Steve.
Beautiful.
I'm pretty sure.
I like nice
Whoa,
fish.
whoa. Pulling.
She's pulling now. Oh, I just got to look at it.
Yeah, it's a good back on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, baby.
You got her? I can't even see it. It's a good one?
Yeah, it's a nice one, brother. They're all nice here.
That's a big walleye.
No,
I don't even want to predict the size of it, but that's a big walleye. And there's a lot bigger than that.
Oh, my.
Absolutely a bunch. What a fantastic fishery. You got to come. You do. So that was a great day. That was in November last year, 2019. Yep. We got 3 or 4 fish that size, all trolling. You saw the boards beside the boat. You saw actually, I don't know if you really saw closely, there was a crazy looking crankbait in there. It was the one that looked like this, but it was in that Barbie color. There was So what happens is the normal fishing system is what Gord and I were talking about, is trolling with boards and blah, 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 blah. Stevie used to go back when I was going back 15 years ago, whatever. He used to fish the Bay of Quinte, but he did it a whole different way than I did. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, it wasn't 15 years ago. I started fishing Bay of Quinte my first year would have been about 1992.
Okay.
So I'd like it if that was 15 years ago, but I'm pretty sure it's a little longer than that. But yeah, to be honest with you, friends of mine and I would go, and we would stay either at the tip of the bay hotel, which isn't there anymore, or the Sportsman Hotel out in the highway, or the Picton Harbor Inn, which is still there and owned and operated by Scott Wilcott, who does a fantastic job there.
Great place. Great place.
Absolutely. We'd go, and it started about the third week of November weekend, because I was working back then, and we'd leave Friday after work and get there, and it was all night fishing, and we'd fish right off the docks. Again, we'd fish off of the yacht club, the Picton Yacht Club docks. We fish off the government dock right there by the tip of the bay, and we would stand on those docks. And I honestly, I didn't tell many people how we did, just because I knew that if they were fishermen, they probably wouldn't believe me. Because the average size fish for us was 10 pounds. And the biggest fish that the guys in our group caught, a firefighter buddy of mine, Glenn Barry, I wasn't with him that night, but one night he caught 2 fish over 16 pounds off of the government dock right there in Picton.
2 over 16 each?
Yeah. He let one go and he mounted one.
Oh
yeah.
My God.
Yeah. It wasn't uncommon for us to catch well over 150 pounds of fish in a night with 4 of us fishing and weighing them and throwing them back. You know, when I was a kid, I thought that walleye were that big.
Yeah.
I didn't catch small ones.
Yeah.
I only fished walleye. Like, I mean, back then I was, 16, 17. Yeah. We used to fish a little bit in Key River and places like that for northern pike in the spring, but we go to Picton and it was just another day in the office to catch them. I knew they were big because we always looked at world records and kept up with that kind of stuff, because that was a place where line class records can be set and still can be set.
Wow. So it was strictly a nighttime thing, though, right?
Always strictly night.
You never tried it in the day, or you just never got it?
They wouldn't come in. They wouldn't come in the bay during the day. Right. It was only at night they would come in there, and they would come in waves, like in schools. Right. Our typical fishing trip in Picton was to go and we would get there, check into our hotel at about 5-6 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we'd run down to dock, and in those days there was always locals kicking around, and they'd be sitting on their 5-gallon pails and fishing away, and we'd go down, maybe throw an hour or so casting off the docks, but it didn't typically get good until we went back to our hotel room, had a couple of pops, and watched the hockey game. Then after the hockey game at 10:30, we go back to the dock, and we'd fish from 10:30 till about a good shift would be 3:30 in the morning, Yeah. And we would cast. Really, we had specific baits, and and I'll tell you what they were. Like, I mean, we used Rebel spoonbills. We got onto Man's 20 plus. We used fast tracks. But the one thing that was always the common factor with them is your huge deep diving lip. And we weren't using them to dive deep. That's not why we were using those. But you needed your minnow bait. Yes, that's it right there. I think that looks like my bait, Pete. You would read my box there.
That's the Angelo Viola.
Oh, yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
absolutely.
But the way we would fish them, we would stand on the dock and we'd cast out as far as you could throw, give it 2 or 3 real sharp tugs to get that bill to dig down, right, and then reel that bait as slow as you could reel it. And when you thought you were going as slow as you could go, half that much slower again. And that bait literally would be just passing through the water doing this. And that big bill was what kept it down the 3 or 4 feet. And that's all it was. It was down 3, 4, maybe 5 feet. And it would just slowly come through the water just like that.
Wow.
We got
did you ever figure out how deep the water it was you were casting into? Did you ever?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't until I met up with you guys and we had that we did a weekend out at Merlin Park,
right?
And I was there with a buddy of mine, and we metered it, and it's right there, right where we're going into to Scott's place at Picton Harbor Inn, right in front of the yacht club, and it's about 15 feet, right in there.
So they're 15 feet of water, and you're running that bait. You figured that bait is no deeper than 5 feet deep, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, you couldn't get it to go much deeper than that 5 feet because you were reeling it so slow.
Yeah.
I had a Yozuri bait. I forget what the bait was called, but it was made by Yozuri.
Crystal minnow, by any chance, something like that?
It could be.
Yeah.
But this bait ended up getting waterlogged. It got a hole in it. So it was supposed to be a suspending lure, but it actually sank like a countdown. It worked real well for me. I didn't tell anybody why it was working. I knew why it was working. It would slowly just sink a little bit.
Yeah. It's freaky because when Gordy was on earlier, we were talking about the baits, you know what I mean? And the man's 20 plus came up in the conversation, 15 and 20. You just said that there for casting. The spoonbill that came up. We've been running spoonbills forever and ever and ever. So it's funny that we were out in the open water trolling these baits over 30 to 130 feet of water, being successful. You were in casting these same baits in 15 feet of water and just as successful, if not more successful. So on a good night, yourself, not all your buddies in that, could you catch 10 walleye in a good night off the shore?
Yeah, right off the dock.
Really, eh?
On a good night, yeah.
Yeah.
And on a good night, you'd catch one under 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Because those were the ones that you could take home. You could take when I first started going there, the first walleye I caught there was like 11 and a half pounds. And I thought, oh my God, my dad's going to love this. So I took it home. And then I got reading the regulations, and it tells you that anything out of Lake Ontario, you're not only supposed to eat, I forget what it was back in the early 90s, but you're only supposed to eat a certain amount because of the pollution in the water. So I said, Dad, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't eat that. And then after that, I never kept another one. And, you know, the earlier that we went up, so we would start going, about the third week of November, and we'd go every weekend until it iced in. And when I say iced in, I'm not talking like frozen solid. I'm talking if you got a skim of ice, we were done. Like, I mean, there were lots of times we were up there and the ice would skim over while we were fishing, and you'd cast your bait out and you'd hear it go ting, 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 ting. And you're like, son of a, and trying to reel it in, or to go out and it would drop and break through. And then you start reeling and it goes straight up and then bing, 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 bing across the ice. And then you're looking around to yell at the guys in the boat quarter of a mile away and say, hey, come do some donuts for us. Break it up. You know, we used to bring an anchor. We didn't have a boat. We brought an anchor so we could twist the anchor up and drop her out and bust up the ice when it was freezing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is.
Oh yeah.
That is something. And now you'd run a little trail or whatever. You bust that thin ice up, and then you get a couple of cat. You'd have to wait for them to settle down.
It's just thin. You've seen it happen before, Pete. You know, you start getting those plates of thin ice floating around out there. Then all of a sudden, it just kind of all just goes, and it happens in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're like, see the ice floating by, and you're like, okay, boys, you got to get down here. And a lot of times it was so cold. The smaller fish came early. That's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
But in December, first week of December, we got out there sometimes. And the ice would freeze up, and it was so cold out there that I would always go with 4 guys usually. 3 of us would sit in a truck in the heat, and we'd send one guy down on the dock to cast. And as soon as he got a fish, he'd yell up, "Okay, boys, they're here." And we'd all run down with our rods and start fishing. We'd take stuff cold.
You guys were scouting. That's friggin' awesome. Now,
yeah.
fast forward to today. Do you think there are people that are watching here that are on the side there and they're saying, "God, I'd love to try that." Do you think it would still be going in this day and age, or have things changed that much?
Things have changed, Peter. I would love to say that it's going like it was, and it is like when we were there last fall. I actually took a night and walked down to the Prince Edward Yacht Club and fished off those docks. And you know, I've had the lodge the last 10 years, and it was really slowing down before then. Right. And I haven't fished it for 10 years, and I was out there and I didn't get anything. Yeah. I'm not saying that it can't work, because it did work, and the shad are still in there. And that was always key, to see the shad boiling, and you could, sometimes they were so thick you could rip your bait through, and you'd hook the shad just swimming your bait through the big schools. But it's not like it was. I can't tell you to take those baits and go stand on the end of that dock and fish for a night and you're going to catch 10 walleye. Right. Even in the mid 2000s, a good night was, you know, with 4 of us fishing, if we caught 2 or 3 walleye over, well, they were all over 10 pounds. Yeah. That was a good night. Yeah. That was a good night.
You know what? But, see, nowadays, though, what Steve did there, let's just say this is the way fishing works, and this is the way fishing works on guys' minds like Steve and I and Ange and I. And that, now, what Steve is saying there, you can take that technique, and it doesn't have to be on Picton Bay and Picton Harbor, and et cetera, et cetera. You can take that technique throughout the whole summer, but especially in the fall. You can take baits like these baits that dive down like that, with the big bill on them like that, the suspend nut, and at nighttime off ashore, because a lot of times the walleye will move in towards the shallows after the dark, and it can be your best chance at getting a giant fish, no matter what lake you're fishing. As long as your lake's got walleye on it, and if a giant is 6 pounds, you got a great chance of catching a 6-pound walleye on that lake by working the shorelines, like Steve was saying. You find out where the area of the bait is, or you find out where locals are catching a lot of fish out trolling in the daytime. You go to that bank that day, you know, and even if you're in a boat, you cast towards the bank. Now you're casting shallow, just like you're bass fishing. It really works well. I've had some of my absolute best Bay of Quinte walleye fishing was after dark, and it was with lights like you have in the harbor. There's lights around and all that, which attract the shad, and the walleye, you know, use the lights in the shade to smash these shad and all that. So nighttime fishing for walleye is without a doubt, if you can get out there and do it, is a phenomenal way of catching them. If you can do it this time of year, it's even better. Like Gord Pyzer was on saying the same thing. He said they went out at night and trolling was crazy. So it was absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and I will say that when we were there last year, I had an in-depth conversation with Scott, and he explained that with the year classes coming through and working their way up, he said there are some absolutely huge year classes coming into that, you know, 8 to 10 to 12 range right now. So whatever happened in Picton from, you know, 1990 to 2004, it very well, as you know, Pete, fishing always happens in cycles, right? And I for one am waiting for that evening bite to come back. You know, one of my best nights was actually on my bass boat, just floating, trolling through that harbor, and at the mouth there's a green buoy that's just as you leave Picton Harbor. You can still see the dock that I fish off of, just trolling a weed line right out there and casting with my trolling motor, just like I was fishing bass. You know, it's an unbelievable experience. If you can get on it, it's dynamite. It really is. And like Pete said, go ahead, Pete.
And I was gonna say with that year class that you're talking about, with the if the year class, like Scott knows, Scott Walcott and his brother David, they guide there. They know all about. They study this kind of stuff. So if they say a good year class is coming up in the next 2 or 3 years, the next 2 3 spawns, it's going to happen. You know what I mean? From the old spawns, it's going to happen. So that way, there's no reason why if the shad are in that Picton Bay, there's no reason why the wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's going to be
absolutely. And the thing is, with Bay of Quinte, the way that I would attack it now is I would call Scott, book to stay there. He's very reasonable as far as pricing goes for his accommodations. There's the restaurant. You're right on the harbor, literally, and take him for a guide for a day, stay the weekend, and then in the evening and in the night, give it a shot. Like, give it a shot, because I can tell you, I have caught, I don't even know. I've caught hundreds of walleye between 10 and 14 pounds. Yeah, there's one of them right there.
Good God.
There are very, very few places on this planet that you can go and you can catch walleye like that and fairly consistently. It's one of those places. And having said that, Peter had mentioned that you can take that knowledge and apply it to different lakes. I did that. I took that same principle and I applied it to the Upper French River, and it worked exactly the same. Exactly. All you need to find on the Upper French in particular, because it's deep and there's lots of shoals and humps. The walleye will sit in that 35 to 40 feet during the day. They're nocturnal feeding fish. And if you find those big schools of fish, all you need to do is look around for that shoal or a point or a rocky bay where they're fairly close to in 8 to 12 feet of water, sometimes even less. And once the sun drops behind the horizon and it starts to get dark, troll it, cast it, and those walleye come up there. They'll come up onto the closest hump in that 15 to 5 feet of water at night, and they'll feed. And you can catch them there. Whether you want to troll or cast is up to you, but it does work.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, there's not many more fun walleye fishing scenarios than casting crankbaits to the shoreline, just so in 3 to 5 feet of water like that, and expecting a smashing strike, not just a mushy feel, a smashing strike almost every time. It is such a cool bite when you get onto it. And like you said, from the boat in or from the shore out, you can work just along the parallel the banks, and it works on almost every walleye lake. If you were to take what Steve's talking about and take it on your walleye lake, but you have to commit to going after dark, you're going to see a whole lake, a whole different lake, because the night bite is so much different than the day bite. If there is, you know what I mean? If there even is a day bite or a decent one. There was a couple questions up there, but just Stevie, there was Andy Lynch. What were they coming up to the dock for? Was it bait fish?
Yes, yeah, it was the shad. The schools of shad would come into the bay itself, and where we were fishing, a good long cast would get you about a third of the way across the bay. So we were basically fishing the walleye as they were coming into the bay, and we were intercepting them as they were chasing the shad. And back in the heyday, the shad would boil. You'd see them actually boiling on top of the water. And as soon as you saw that, it was like that depot fishing in Perry Sound last spring. You remember we would see the little boil and cast to them?
Yeah.
The walleye in Picton were very similar. You waited for the shad to all boil, but there were like areas that were 5-6 foot square where you'd see 100 shad jumping out of the water all at the same time. And you knew those walleye were coming in, and they were just, going through those schools like killer whales. These little fellas, and they're like, "Oh shit, we gotta go!"
Yeah. be there right now. This is a good one too. Ken Johnson, do they come as far as Trenton, mouth of Trenton River for shore fishing this time of year too? I've never done it this time of year, Ken, but I know Quinte well enough. I know Trenton well enough. I know the Trent River well enough to say yes. There's no way that they're not there already. So for the whole month of November, I would, if you can plant yourself on it, there's some good shoreline areas around there, both on the east and west side of that river that you could access, being careful. That you certainly could catch some walleyes towards the mouth, as far as you can get towards the mouth. Now, if you have a boat, it's even better because you got some weed beds, et cetera, that are in a little bit deeper water too. But they're already staging, they're already ready to come up the Trent River, believe it or not. Because, I mean, in November, I don't know how many years ago, Ange and I got into Big Bay. We got a bite on Big Bay, which is just east of Belleville, and we got some giants there as well. So that they're constantly moving. They're not just staying in the Adolphus Reach. They're coming from Lake Ontario. They're going to the Adolphus Reach. They're coming through the Long Reach. They're going towards the Napanee River, and then they are heading west towards Belleville. They are heading west towards Trenton, and they're also coming in from Brighton Bay, which is on Lake Ontario. They come through that canal, and the first stop is Trenton. Those are all going to probably spawn in the spring. So they could be there already, and they won't be going anywhere. Those fish will spawn up the Trent River somewhere. That is their zone for the next 6 months of their lives. By come May, May and June, they're going to be blowing out of there. But there got to be fish. If they're not there yet, there's got to be some there very soon. And it's a guess, but it's a very educated guess. Knowing that I fished that body of water forever and knowing those areas. So. And there it is. Do they come out to the Murray Canal area? That's what I just said. So the Murray Canal, for those listening, is the Brighton Bay to the Bay of Quinte. That joins the west side of Bay of Quinte. That's where it comes in. The Bay of Quinte, being a bay, has openings on both sides. The Murray Canal is the area where it comes through Brighton Bay into the Murray Canal. It's a man-made canal, and then it opens to the head of the bay, they call it, and that's Trenton right there. The Trent River is right to the north of that, so north and a bit east. So they do come through there too as well. So there's all these migration routes, and walleye are all about migration, and they're doing a lot of it already. They're starting, but there have been fish doing it since October, September even probably. But those big ones, they're all starting to do it now. And then when they get it in their head to go, they're gone. They'll leave that Adolphus Reach. They'll be through the Long Reach. They'll be up by Deserano in a day, and the next day they're at Trenton if they want to be. So it's I would say yes, Ken. You need to get out there with Steve's shore techniques or trolling. You're going to smash them. So
some nights you get them, and some nights you don't. It's just that
exactly. That's exactly it. It's a commitment.
One night.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. Don't let one night get you down.
Yeah, exactly. If somebody's got a road trip coming up to the Bay of Quinte, got one more question. Let's see if we can get one more question for Stevie or something like that. Sounds like a great fishing show. When can we see it on TV? We'd love to do that one on TV. That would be imagine back in your day, but we did that. My first ever Fishing Canada television show was, I believe it was on the Bay of Quinte for nighttime walleye. So and they were feeding on shad, just to let everybody know. So it's been going on there forever. So if you know what, there's no more questions. That's okay. That's fine. One guy asked about Ange. So Ange is not here tonight. No problem. He's just he's healing up. He's got an issue with his foot, and he just wants to stay off of it. So he's staying at home, and he's letting Stevie and I take the reins here, for so to speak, and he'll be healing up. He'll be here next week for sure. I will guarantee you that. He will. You can't hold that guy down very long. That's for sure. He went me on Friday, and he suffered through. He had the problem with his foot. I don't know how bad it was, and I know and Stevie. He would never tell you how bad it was. If it was a 10 out of 10, he'd say, it's about a 4. I can do it. No, let's go. Let's go. That's just the way he is. So, but he's on the mend. He'll be Stephen Labadie, nice boy, nice Stevie boy, nice hair. He'll be on the mend. So thanks for asking for that. And I'm guaranteeing Ange will be back next week. So, Stephen, my friend, thank you so much, buddy, for joining me for this little enlightening everybody else on a totally different look of the Bay of Quinte, and hopefully it'll come back. I mean, it's
my pleasure, and I'll be the first one standing on those docks and shore if it does.
If it comes back,
it's going to come. It's just a matter of when.
I think so too, like a good year class. And if Stevie goes, and it's a great suggestion. If Stevie goes, he gets it dialed in, we'll try and do maybe a night shoot TV show for it, which would make an awesome show. I think
it would be outstanding.
It would be
Yeah.
a blast. They pull like crazy. It's such an excitement level in the dark, eh?
Oh yeah. Well, like I mean, even you were saying with the boat and people going out and doing that night fish, and it's a totally different lake. Your lake is totally different at night. It's absolutely stunning. You get a clear night with no moon, and the stars are just ridiculous and quiet, and nobody else is out there fishing, and you've got it all to yourself. It's honestly, it's my favorite time to fish.
No kidding. And very quickly, you're heading out tomorrow morning, really early. Where are you going?
I am heading up to the Upper French River. It's where my the Chaudière Lodge is, and I still have a piece of heaven up there, and we're going to close out the season with a muskie fish.
And how many days?
We're heading out tomorrow. We'll be back on Monday, so it's a good one.
It's a good one, brother. Well, all the best. Say hi to Ginger and Pat and the boys, and you have some.
I certainly will, and I'll keep growing that hair. Don't you worry.
And take pictures and take video, please.
I certainly will. And I'll keep you up to date. And the upcoming show, Peter, it's going to bring back some fantastic memories for me.
Absolutely.
You know, way west. Yeah.
Absolutely, buddy.
You know, and you were talking about eating northern pike. Well, we had one heck of a shore lunch out on Fishing Lake with Urs today, and you know, I think we should all you out there, if you haven't seen this up and coming episode at Northern Rockies Lodge, it's going to be on Saturday morning, and it's going to be Pete and I out there. So everybody tune in.
It's a good one. We'll show you a little teaser at the end of the program, folks. So thanks, Stevie. Have yourself a great fishing trip, and please give me all kinds of info when you get back. Okay. I
certainly will. You'll get it all.
Best of luck.
Mate. Appreciate it.
Steve Nitzwicki, he's taking this is going to be a good. He has asked Angie and I both about this fishing trip. He says, "Guys, come on, you got to come on this fishing trip with us." But we just couldn't make it. Especially Ange right now couldn't make it for sure. So, I'd like to thank him. Patrick Walsh, of course, Outdoor Canada Magazine. That was an awesome little interview, and of course, Gordy Pyzer talking about all our line counters and trolling and how you can go from that to this to these little baits to the snap weights. To everything like that. If you just tuned in late, this is going to be on YouTube, and you can watch this whole thing. We went through the whole thing. Gord and I went through the whole thing about trolling, etc. Please be sure to enter the contests, and then keep looking, because we have new ones coming up, and we had some great, and we're working on great prizes all the time. And as Ange and I told you, we've been teasing, we got one coming up that's a killer contest. It's going to be maybe our best ever. It's going to be the excitement, our excitement. We've got the product here already. We're going to unbox it. We'll show you exactly what's going to go on, and you're going to love it. And thank you for all the well wishes to Angelo. He's going to be back. I'm sure he'll be back next week. So fishingcanada.com, share. Do everything you can to help us out, please. We do appreciate it. And this is fun. I mean, this is when you can sit there and unleash a guy like me to talk fishing for a couple hours with a bunch of guys like that. We love it. So as long as you guys are loving it and girls are loving it, we'll keep doing it. So thanks very much. And hopefully if you check out the show this weekend, like Steve was talking about, BC Pike with Steve and myself, and we'll see you next week. I think I'm going to like BC pike fishing.
Unbelievable BC lake.
Oh, yeah. See, that's what it's all about right there, brother. Coming in and catching these all day. What a fishery up there. BC, pike, like this, in British Columbia, in the Rocky Mountains. Woo!
I love it.
Another beauty, like look at the size of these fish.